The Walshe property, can you describe how it's situated in relation to the roadway?
It's on Route 3A. It's a long driveway set back behind a used auto dealership. It's surrounded by woods. Maybe a quarter mile into the backyard is another neighborhood.
And so it's woods between those two neighborhoods?
Yes.
Was anything recovered during the canine search?
No.
Now, did you have the opportunity, or did the Cohasset PD have the opportunity to enlist any other law enforcement agencies on the 5th?
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity to be present when a search warrant was executed in Cohasset?
Yes.
And who was executing the search warrant?
The CPAC unit with conjunction with the Cohasset Police.
And who was home at the residence when the search warrant was executed?
Mr. Walshe, the 3 children, and his mother.
Now, when the warrant was executed, did anyone arrive to assist Mr. Walshe after the warrant was first served?
Attorney Miner.
About how long did it take for her to arrive?
15 minutes.
And once Attorney Miner arrived, what was done with the family and Mr. Walshe?
We moved car seats around so they could leave the premises with Attorney Miner.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm the body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit. At 6:34 a.m. on the 1st, can you throw away body parts? At 9:29 a.m., what does formaldehyde do? At 9:34 a.m. on the 1st, how long does DNA last? At 9:59 a.m., can identification be made on partial remains? At 11:34 a.m., dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. At 11:44, how to clean blood from wooden floor. At 11:56 on the 1st, luminol to detect blood. At 1:08, what happens when you put body parts in ammonia? At 1:21 p.m., is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? Those were on the January 1st.
Are you ready for arraignment?
Yes.
Brian Walshe of Cohasset in the County of Norfolk on or about January 1st, 2023 at Cohasset in the County of Norfolk did assault and beat Ana Walshe with intent to murder her, and by such assault and beating did kill and murder said Ana Walshe. This indictment for first-degree murder, sir. How do you wish to plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Thank you. 1 count of misleading a police officer and 1 count of conveying a human body. How do you wish to plead, sir, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Thank you. You can have a seat. Question of bail.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Connor.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth would ask that the defendant be held without bail as a result of being charged. Your Honor, on January 4th, that morning, the defendant, Brian Walshe, first reported to his wife's employer in Washington, D.C., that his wife, Ana Walshe, had been missing since January 1st at approximately 6 a.m. He had reported that she had told him that she was leaving town for a work emergency and was flying out of Logan, and that she would be returning back to Washington and was looking to find her at her employment. Commonwealth has established that this was a lie. By this time that he had killed her, dismembered her, and disposed of her body. In early of 2022, Ms. Walshe had obtained employment at Tishman Speyer in Washington, D.C. As a result of that, Tishman Speyer had asked her to move to D.C. and work out of Washington, D.C. It is a national property management company, Your Honor. Ms. Walshe and Mr. Walshe sold the family home that was in Cohasset and purchased a residence in Washington, D.C. Mr. Walshe was unable to leave the state at that time because he was on pretrial conditions out of the federal district court. They rented another home on Chief Justice Cushing Highway in Cohasset, and Ms. Walshe would commute from the property that they owned in D.C., working in D.C. during the week and being with the family on the weekends. In December of 2022, it had become evident that Mr. Walshe was suspecting his wife of having an affair. He was routinely visiting the Instagram page of one of her male friends, and on December 26th, his mother, with his input and direction, obtained and hired a private investigator to surveil Ana Walshe in Washington, D.C. On December 27th, the oldest son's iPad was used to research best states to get divorced in and worst states to get divorced in. On December 28th, Ana Walshe had dinner with a friend in Washington, D.C. and became uncharacteristically upset and told her friend that she believed that Mr. Walshe was going to be incarcerated as a result of this federal case and that she was prepared to leave him and take the children to Washington, D.C. Investigation, it was determined that in 2001, Ana Walshe had taken out approximately $2.2 million in life insurance on herself, where Brian Walshe is the sole beneficiary. And as a result of working at Tishman Speyer, she has an additional more than $400,000 life insurance policy where he was the sole beneficiary. In total, her life insurance is over $2.7 million where the defendant was the sole beneficiary. Your Honor, as a result of the extensive investigation that was done into this case, the defendant's grave incentive to flee, being charged with murder, and that he has one open matter, I would ask that the defendant be held without bail.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Miner.
Your Honor, the defense would ask that bail be set at $250,000, and I can respond to some of the points
Sure.
The prosecutor has made. Your Honor, it has been 4 months since Ana Walshe has last been seen. It's on January 1st of this year. As Your Honor knows, under Massachusetts, a person is not presumed dead because they're missing for a period of 7 years, because it is easy for a single person to disappear if they want to disappear. In that 4 months, there's been no body found. There's been no indication of if she died, how she died. There's no murder weapon. There's no motive. The government suggests that Brian Walshe suspected his wife of an affair, but there's really no evidence of that. His mother did hire a private investigator shortly before New Year's that year. She told Mr. Walshe that she was doing that. He said she was crazy. Ana's a good girl, but go ahead. You'll be proved wrong. The investigator never found any evidence of an affair because they didn't actually have time to start doing anything before Ana went missing. Mr. Walshe had no idea that his wife was having an affair until he learned the discovery in this case. There was a friend over. The last time she was seen was New Year's Eve. They were having Mr. Walshe made dinner for the friend. They were having a celebratory New Year's Eve dinner. They were having champagne. They each signed the outside box of the champagne bottle saying that 2023 was going to be their best year ever, that they were a triumvirate, that there was only good things going to happen in 2023. There was no indication of any discord, no silences, no feeling that there was anything but happiness between the couple. The friend did leave at 1:30 in the morning, and that was the last time that she was seen by an adult. With respect to the Google searches, Your Honor, yes, I get that they're problematic. But there were other Google searches that the prosecutor didn't mention, including a search of how to set up a charitable corporation to give away large lottery winnings tax-free. Well, Mr. Walshe never won a large amount of money in the lottery, and Mr. Walshe never set up a charitable contribution. There were also Google searches on best places to go for a family vacation in 2023. Best places to go for family vacations, all in the same time period, Your Honor. With respect to the blood in the basement, the police did take 8 separate swabs from the basement, which they thought contained blood. One of the 8 that we know of was sent to the lab for a confirmatory test. It came back negative. We don't know if the other 7 were just waiting for them to come back, or if they just decided to abandon that when one came back negative and not spend the money to do the other 7. But while it may be that the police who saw the little swabs, the spots, which looked really like rust, old basement, it's an old house, thought it was blood, at least the one that was tested came back negative. With respect to the Tyvek suit, Your Honor, we did get the forensics back from the DA. It does test positive by a large number for Ana Walshe's DNA. It also tests positive for another unknown person's DNA. And when they tried to match Brian Walshe's DNA to that unknown DNA, they came back very, very small, infinitesimally small, so that, well, you can't rule him out. The conclusion was you can't rule him in. So it suggests that there was at least another person's DNA on that Tyvek suit. With respect to cleaning supplies, yes, Mr. Walshe bought a lot of cleaning supplies. Many of them were still in the basement, untouched. The police photographed them. Those photographs were presented in the discovery. Your Honor, with respect to CVS and Whole Foods, they did interview Mr. Walsh. He said he went to CVS. He didn't say which one. They assumed it was Swansea. That's not because he said it was in Swansea. They actually followed up with me and said, can you get me which CVS he went to? Got back to them, said Danvers, and guess what? That's where he was. They got the video. We told them which CVS it was. The fact that they went to the wrong one at the beginning was no fault of Mr. Walsh's. With respect to Whole Foods, Your Honor, Whole Foods is right next to Bennett Liquors. The prosecutor himself said that they saw Mr. Walsh in the parking lot that day. Mr. Walsh has been operative with the police from day one. As the prosecutor indicated, he consented to give his phones to the police. He consented to give the iPads to the police. He allowed 3 consent searches of the place, including with blood-sniffing canines, where the canines came up with nothing. He consented to draining the home's pool, which came up with nothing. He's been nothing but cooperative in this. He did call the employer on Wednesday when she was gone for 3 days and asked if she was there. Your Honor, that followed a pattern. Since Thanksgiving, Ana Walshe was gone, was not being able to be contacted for periods of days at a time. When Brian asked her about that, she said, oh, don't be a worrywart. Don't call my employer. He waited 3 days to call her employer, assuming she had gone back to D.C. as he said. She said she was going to and was involved in a work emergency. When talking to Tishman's Fire, the head of security said that they would notify the police because the security person there had contacts with law enforcement. And they, in fact, did contact both the Washington, D.C. police and the Cohasset police. The Cohasset police came out to the home in Cohasset that afternoon, and Mr. Walsh gave 2 interviews on that same day. Your Honor, the prosecution also suggests maybe a financial motive because of life insurance policies, but there's no evidence Mr. Walsh was in the least bit needing of money. His mother, as the prosecution knows, is wealthy. She's given tens of thousands of dollars to Ana and to Brian. He was not in need of anything, nor were his children. Your Honor, that brings me to the point of Mr. Walsh has been the children. He has 3 young children who he has been the primary caregiver since each of those children were born. Gotten them up, he's gotten them clothed, he's gotten them bathed, he's taken them to school, he's taken them to appointments, he's taken them to the beach. He was the primary caregiver of those children. Ana worked a lot. She wasn't home on nights and weekends, even when she was working in Boston. She moved to D.C. for a job in March of 2022, where she would come home on weekends if she could. Not every weekend, and even on weekends when she was home, she spent a fair amount of time without being with the children. Mr. Walsh is the primary caregiver, always has been. It may be somewhat easy to disappear if you're an adult and single. It is not easy to disappear with 3 young children. Those children live in Massachusetts. The only family he has are the 3 young children, his mother, who also lives in Massachusetts. So I would suggest that there is no risk of flight here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Counsel, I need 2 dates, a pretrial conference and a pretrial hearing.
Just so you know, I've been assigned this case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Walsh, you're going to be held without bail.
I'm often called Greg Lowrance.
Gregory Lowrance, Cohasset Police Department.
And how long have you worked there?
About 6 years.
And why were you dispatched to 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway?
Cohasset Police Dispatch got a call from a mail party by the name of Hugh Dunleavy in Washington, D.C., stating that one of his employees has not been seen since the previous Friday.
And do you remember the name of the employee that he was calling about?
Ana Walshe.
And did he say where she resided?
She resided in Cohasset.
And what did he say about where her vehicle was located?
Her vehicle was located on the property. It was last seen on the parking lot logging system on the 29th of December, 2022.
Down in D.C.?
Yes, sir.
And was it explained as far as her relationship to Washington, D.C. and why she had a residence in Cohasset?
She works down in Washington, D.C. and commutes back and forth.
And now, sir, when you got to 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Who did you meet there at that residence?
Brian Walshe.
Can you explain to me what happened when you got to the house that day?
I exited my cruiser, and he met me at the doorway and said that he wanted to report his wife missing and file a police report with the Cohasset Police.
And what was his demeanor like when you saw him at the doorway?
Very calm.
Now, this initial interaction with Mr. Walshe, was it recorded?
No, it was not.
Why wasn't it recorded?
Cohasset Police did not have body-worn cameras at that time.
And so what had he told you he had done to try and locate his wife at this point in time?
He told me that he had tried texting her, and he did contact his employer, her employer.
And what did he tell you as far as the last time he had seen his wife?
It would be Sunday morning, January 1st, 2023, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7 a.m.
Did he say where she was going after that point?
She had a work emergency and had to go back to Washington, D.C.
Did he say how she was going to leave the home that day?
She was going to take either an Uber or a Lyft.
And head to where, sir?
Logan Airport.
Now, what did he say about his attempts to contact her?
He has attempted to contact her via text, and also he had reached out to coworkers and acquaintances in the D.C. area.
And when she was working in D.C., did he tell you how often he would have contact with her?
He said that usually they would speak frequently, and she would FaceTime with their children.
And did he have any information about where she resided in Washington, D.C. during the week?
They own a townhouse down there.
Did he give you the address?
He did give me the address. I do not know it off the top of my head.
That's okay. And did he give you any information concerning her vehicle in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, she had a vehicle that she kept down there. It was a 2022 gray Volkswagen Taos.
What did he provide you?
The end of that, it was a 2022 what?
Volkswagen Taos.
Thank you.
And, sir, did he provide you a physical description of her?
Yes, the description standing 5'2" in height, about 115 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes.
Now, how long was this interaction with Mr. Walshe at the Walshe home that morning when you went to go see him?
Probably about 20, 30 minutes maybe.
And after that, where'd you go?
I left the residence, and then I did return to the same house later that evening.
Did you have to fill out any documentation after you left the residence?
Yes, I went back to the Cohasset Police Station and filled out an NCIC missing persons report.
Officer, do you recognize the...
Yes, you did.
What is the document I just handed you?
There's a missing persons report for an NCIC record entry.
And what is an NCIC entry?
It is a database where we can enter information on a missing person that goes out to surrounding police and other law enforcement agencies.
And where did you get the information to fill out that report?
Mr. Walshe.
And that's the report you filled out after meeting with Mr. Walshe that day on the 4th?
Correct.
Officer, what information did Cohasset PD have at this point in time from Mr. Dunleavy as far as the last time Miss Walshe had been seen at her workplace?
They had a record of her on their security system on the 29th of December.
And what was the information that Cohasset PD had at this time as far as the last time Miss Walsh's car was recorded entering or exiting a Tishman Speyer facility in Washington, D.C.?
It was recorded on the parking lot logging system at right around 5 a.m. on the 30th of December.
And what information did Mr. Dunleavy provide Cohasset PD as far as the accessibility from that location to getting to Reagan International Airport?
She can usually easily access the airport via train from that location.
What did Cohasset PD do that afternoon as far as attempting to locate Miss Walsh's cell phone?
A ping was ordered by Cohasset Police from her cell phone provider.
What is a ping?
A ping is the process of determining the last activity of a cell phone by having it send a signal to a nearby cell phone tower.
Okay. Now, sir, when was the last time, according to the information that was received for the request for the ping, that Miss Walsh's phone interacted with a tower?
It was 3:14 a.m. on January 2nd, 2023.
And do you know the location of the tower it had contact with?
Yes, it was on Reservoir Road in Cohasset.
Now, that tower, how close is that to the family home for the Walshe?
About a quarter of a mile.
And how were you able to identify the provider for Miss Walsh's cell phone?
Mr. Walshe advised me of the provider of the cell phone.
And is that also how you got the phone number?
Yes, sir.
Now, did Mr. Walshe provide you any information concerning what airline Ana Walshe was going to fly that morning on January 1st?
Yes, sir.
What did he say?
She was flying with JetBlue airline.
And what did Cohasset PD do that afternoon to find out if Miss Ana Walshe had flown on JetBlue?
We contacted Massachusetts State Troopers assigned to the Logan Airport barracks to inquire with JetBlue, and they advised them that they had no record of ever flying with JetBlue that morning.
And what is it that Cohasset PD did that afternoon to contact the carrier Uber to see if it had had any contact with Ana Walshe on January 1st?
We did a records request with Uber, and they had no records of any pickups or drop-offs from 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway in Cohasset.
And, sir, also, what was done as far as Cohasset PD attempting to contact law enforcement in Washington, D.C. to locate Ana Walshe?
Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department was contacted to check the townhouse where Ana stays when she's working down there, and they entered it with Mr. Walsh's permission and did not find any signs of forced entry, and Ana was not there.
Did you ever have the opportunity on January 4th, that Wednesday, to return back to 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway?
Yes, I did.
About what time did you return?
I think it was shortly after 6:30 p.m.
And who returned with you to the residence?
Then Detective Harrison Schmidt.
And who was at the house when you arrived at the residence?
Mr. Walsh and his 3 children.
And do you now know the ages of those 3 children on January 4th?
At that point, they were ages 2, 4, and 6, respectively.
And besides the children and Mr. Walsh, was anyone else home at that point in time at the family residence?
No, there was not.
Were there any pets at the residence at this point in time?
There was a large German Shepherd locked in a cage.
And when you got to the residence, what is it that you and then Detective Schmidt did with Mr. Walsh?
We sat down and did a recorded interview.
So where did this interview occur in the Walsh home?
I was at a dining room table downstairs.
Were you still in uniform at this point in time?
Yes, sir, I was.
And when you were recording the interview, what access did Mr. Walsh have to his children during this point in time?
They were running around the floor freely.
And, sir, have you had the opportunity to review the audio of that interview?
Yes, sir, I have.
And it fairly and accurately recorded the interview that you had that night?
Yes, sir, it does.
In addition, you also had the opportunity to review the transcript of that interview, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Is it an accurate transcript of that interview?
Yes, sir.
How long did the interview last?
I think it was a little under 1 hour.
During that interview, did Mr. Walsh say when his wife Ana had flown home to Cohasset? I'll end it there.
Yes, Friday morning, December 30th.
And what did he do as far as showing you her travel arrangements?
He opened up the JetBlue app and showed us her flight information.
And when you say he opened up the JetBlue app, what device was he showing you this from?
An iPhone.
In his hands, correct?
Yes.
All right. And when he showed you the iPhone, did he say anything else as far as your access to the iPhone?
He turned to Detective Schmidt and said something along the lines of, "It's all there, you can look."
And when was it that she was she being Ana Walsh, initially supposed to fly back to Washington, D.C.?
Tuesday.
What did he provide you as far as information as what Ana Walsh did on December 31st, 2022?
He said that Ana ran some errands and took the children to a play area in Canton.
And what did he say was what he and Ana Walsh did that evening, New Year's Eve, on December 22nd and December 31st, 2022?
They had one of their friends over for dinner.
What was the friend's name?
First name was Jem.
Okay. What time did they say that this person came over to their house?
Approximately 8:30 p.m.
Did anyone else come over for dinner that night?
No.
And where were the children that night?
They were in bed when Jem arrived.
What time did he say that the family friend left?
Right around 1 a.m.
And what time did he say that he and his wife went to bed that evening?
1:30 a.m.
What did Mr. Walsh tell you that Ana had informed him about her having to leave the next day?
A work emergency came up and she had to leave first thing in the morning.
And what did he say to you as far as how she would get to the airport that morning?
Be an Uber or a Lyft.
And what time did he say that she left?
Between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7 a.m.
Did he provide any information as far as the clothing she was wearing?
She was wearing a black coat, gray and blue hunter boots, and a black Prada purse.
During this interview, did Mr. Walsh provide you any information about Ana Walsh's stress level at this point in time in their lives?
Yes, there was a lot of stress in their lives from her commuting back and forth to work.
Was there anything else that she was stressed about, according to Mr. Walsh?
No.
During the interview, did any of the children produce anything?
One of the children, I do not recall which one, asked Mr. Walsh to unlock an iPad for him.
Was he able to do it?
Yes, he was.
And what happened when he unlocked? Did he say anything when he unlocked the iPad?
He typed in a code and said the code out loud.
Do you remember the code?
121212.
And did the children provide any belongings of Ana Walsh during the interview?
They found a sunglass case with sunglasses inside it that Brian said belonged to her.
Now, after this interview, what did you do as far as looking around the house?
With Mr. Walsh's permission, myself, Mr. Walsh, and Detective Schmidt looked around the house just for any potential clues that could help us find Ana.
And when you were inside the house, did you see anything unordinary that was a potential clue for you?
I did not.
What access did you have to the attic?
We did not check the attic.
And that night, did you search the outside of the house?
Yes, sir.
And What did you notice as far as the pool?
It was uncovered, which was strange for this time of year.
And what about the water level?
The water level was high. It was filled.
And did you do anything to look into the water of the pool?
At that time, we shined our flashlights in, but we could not see much. So later on that night, we did request the fire department to respond.
What did you see the fire department do?
They had high-powered spotlights that they shined in, and also they used a large pole to scrape the bottom of the pool.
And was anything recovered when that was done?
No, sir.
Now, that night, did you have the opportunity to see any vehicles that belonged to the Walshe family at the residence?
Yes, sir. There was a Volvo SUV in the driveway.
And did you have the opportunity to look inside the Volvo SUV?
I did look from the outside, yes.
And what, if anything, did you notice about the Volvo SUV?
I only saw one thing. It was in the trunk. It was a folded-up plastic sheet.
That night, did you go into the basement at all?
Yes, I did.
And what did you notice about the basement?
It was fairly clean. Just a refrigerator, a couple boxes of miscellaneous items, and a few full trash bags.
And Your Honor, may I have a moment?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Nothing further.
Cross exam.
Morning.
Morning.
You have any conversations with a district attorney named Lynn Beelan regarding this case?
I did not.
You have any conversations with a trooper named Bukhenik regarding this case?
I did not.
Did you have any conversations with anyone regarding this case and any agreement purportedly made by Mr. Walshe to turn over his cell phone?
I did not.
When you talked on direct examination about Mr. Walshe showing you his phone, he was showing you what? Text messages?
He was showing us text messages and also pictures and flight information.
So the pictures were of what? Ana Walshe and Jim, the friend?
I did not look at him. Detective Schmidt looked at him at that time.
Okay. And he did not show you anything other than those three items?
Not me personally.
And he didn't invite you to look at his phone for anything like location data or anything of the sort?
Not me personally.
And when you say you personally, what do you mean by that? Not me personally.
He did not have me look at anything. I do not know if he gave Detective Schmidt any.
You don't. You were present, though, later on in the evening with Detective Schmidt, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've reviewed that transcript, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's fair to say that nowhere in that transcript that was conducted of the interview on January 4th in the evening hours is there any reference to Mr. Walshe saying, you can look at my phone to look at search data, location data, anything of the sort, is there?
Not that I recall.
Okay, that's all I have.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
The witness may step down. Thank you.
Harrison Schmidt, SCHMIDT.
And where do you work, sir?
Cohasset Police Department.
And how long have you worked there?
13 years.
What is your current rank there?
Sergeant.
And, sir, how many fatal investigations have you worked?
Dozens.
And how many missing person cases have you worked?
Just over a dozen, probably.
And have you been able to locate all of those people?
No.
How many of those people have been deceased when you've done an investigation?
Several.
And what were some of the reasons for why they were deceased?
Medical issues, suicide, exposure to the elements.
Now, are you familiar with the investigation to the disappearance of Ana Walshe?
Yes. I was called in to assist patrol in a missing persons investigation the 4th of January. 3 or 3:30.
And when you say you were called in, where did you go as a result of being called in?
I went to Cohasset Police Headquarters.
And when you got to the Cohasset Police Headquarters, what did you do as far as trying to set up an interview with Mr. Walshe?
I tried to coordinate an interview for that night.
And were you able to?
Yes.
What time did you set up the interview for?
6 or 6:30 p.m.
And why was it 3 hours after you got to the station?
He had to get dinner for his children.
Now, that afternoon, sir, did you do anything to try and locate Miss Walshe?
Yes.
What were you trying to do?
I reviewed the reports I coordinated with the patrol officers that initially responded. I performed queries through law enforcement databases, and then I went to the residence.
Now, I have just a few questions about that January 4th interview. At the January 4th interview with Mr. Walshe, what interaction did you have with him as far as him showing you his cell phone?
He gave me a cell phone to look at.
And what did he say?
He said there was about a year of text messages with Ana Walshe that I could look at, and about 1,000 photographs.
And did you look at the phone that night?
I did.
For about how long?
3 to 5 minutes.
And that night, did you have the opportunity to make any observations of any of the cars at the family home?
Yes.
What car did you look at?
There's a Volvo XC90.
And did you get any permission to look at that car?
Yes.
And who'd you get the permission from?
Mr. Walshe.
And what did you notice about the Volvo?
In the trunk, the trunk was lined with like plastic sheeting.
And so were you able to open it at this point in time?
Yes.
Okay. Now, sir, fast forwarding to January 5th, which was a Thursday, in what you did to try and locate Ms. Walsh on the 5th. Could you explain to us some of the things you did that morning?
I created and disseminated a missing persons bulletin. I began coordinating with friends and family. I checked for international travel and put a flag on her passport if she attempted to do international travel. I coordinated with taxi companies and rideshare and her employer.
Now, was anything done to, as far as canine searches of the area around the Walsh home?
Yes.
Can you describe for me what was done?
The Cohasset police canine and handler searched the property.
And the Walsh property, can you describe how it's situated in relation to the roadway?
It's on Route 3A. It's a long driveway set back behind a used auto dealership. It's surrounded by woods. Maybe a quarter mile into the backyard is another neighborhood.
And so it's woods between those two neighborhoods?
Yes.
Was anything recovered during the canine search?
No.
Now, did you have the opportunity, or did the Cohasset PD have the opportunity to enlist any other law enforcement agencies on the 5th?
Yes.
What was done?
I reported to my supervisor, who requested additional resources from the State Police CPAC unit for Norfolk County.
And when, if ever, did any resources from the State Police Detectives Unit arrive at Cohasset PD?
About 5 p.m. that Thursday.
And who arrived from the State Police Detective Unit?
Trooper DeChico and Sergeant Bukhenik.
And once they arrived, what did you do with these two troopers?
I informed them of what was been done so far in the investigation, and we listened to the audio recording from the first interview.
After having this opportunity to review all this information with these officers, what, if anything, what was done at that point in time in the investigation?
We went to the residence.
Who went to the residence?
Myself, Detective Lieutenant Lopes, Sergeant Hunt, Trooper DeChico, and Sergeant Bukhenik.
And about what time did you go to the residence?
8 p.m.
Did you do anything as far as contacting Mr. Walsh before you arrived at the residence?
I don't recall.
When you arrived at the residence, who was there?
Mr. Walsh was, his 3 children, and his mother.
Was anyone leaving the residence at this hour?
The nanny, Robin Howe, was leaving.
When you got to the residence, did you have the opportunity to conduct any further interviews?
Yes.
Who did you have the interview with?
Mr. Walsh.
Where did the interview take place?
In the dining room and kitchen area.
And can you describe the kitchen dining room area?
Open concept. If you walk into that portion of the house, dining room's on the left, kitchen's on the right. There's a large dining room table. There's window bench seating on one side and chairs on the other sides.
Where'd you sit?
I believe the window bench seat.
And did anyone else from law enforcement participate with the interview with you and Mr. Walsh?
Yes, Trooper DeChico.
And where was Sergeant Hunt?
Sergeant Hunt was also present.
And I take it you're all at the dining room table?
Yes.
So you had mentioned that Detective Lieutenant Lopes and Sergeant Bukhenik also arrived there that night?
Correct.
Where did they go?
They went on the other side of the staircase's TV living room area, and they spoke with Mr. Walsh's mother.
Could you hear them talking to Mr. Walsh's mother?
Yes.
And during that interview, did the defendant have any access to his children?
Yes, they were coming in and out of the interview.
Did the children give you anything that night?
They gave me a piece of art.
Now, have you had the opportunity to review the transcript from that interview?
Yes.
And have you had the opportunity to listen to the audio of that interview?
Yes.
Does the audio fairly and accurately record that interview?
It does, however, there is background noise.
In regards to the transcript, is there anything missing as far as how compared to the audio?
Yes, the background noise isn't included in the transcript.
Is not or is?
Is not, Your Honor.
How long did that interview go on for?
About an hour.
Did Mr. Walsh ask to take any breaks during that interview?
No.
What was his demeanor like during that interview?
He was calm and cooperative.
During that interview, what did he say that his normal contact would be with his wife, Ana Walshe, while she was working in Washington?
A daily contact.
During the interview, did you have the opportunity to ask him whether or not Ana was contemplating suicide?
Yes.
And what was his response to that?
She wouldn't do that.
What, if anything, did he say she was unhappy about?
Stress from work and distance.
And was he asked about extramarital affairs on either side?
Yes.
What did he say?
Neither of them had extramarital affairs.
Did you ask, or was he asked on whether or not, if they had had an argument the morning she left January 1?
Yes.
What was his response?
There wouldn't have been enough time that morning.
What do you say the biggest argument they had had recently was?
She had a 2-week vacation scheduled, and instead of coming home, she was in Belgrade visiting her mother.
Now, did he say what was causing stress in their relationship at this point in time?
Yes.
What was causing stress?
The distance, being away from the children.
And in addition to the distance, were there any other stressors in their relationship?
Prior legal issues.
So he told you that he had another criminal matter going on?
Yes.
What did he tell you as far as his last contact with his wife, Ana Walshe, was?
He was in bed sleeping. This would be the morning of the 1st. She gave him a kiss goodbye, went downstairs to get dressed and leave for work.
And did he tell you what his oldest child told him was his last contact with Ana Walshe?
Yes.
What did he say his oldest child told him?
He said the oldest child was on the couch with an iPad, and Ana Walshe had come down, said goodbye to him, and then left in a vehicle. However, that car did not come up the driveway to the house.
Now, during the interview, who asked to look through the defendant's phone?
Trooper DeChico.
What did he say?
He asked to look through the contents and download the phone.
Now, when he asked to look through the phone, what was the defendant's response?
He said, let me get this straight. You want to download all the contents to my phone?
And what did Trooper DeChico say in response to that?
Yes, all of the contents.
And what concerns did the defendant have after Trooper DeChico said that?
His prior legal issues.
And did he say who he wanted to talk to about this?
His attorney.
And did he say how long it would take for him to get in touch with his attorney and get back to law enforcement about going through his phone?
Yes, he would know likely the next day.
And what did he say his desire was as far as having his phone downloaded?
He said, this is my intention and declaration.
And to be clear, that was also including his desire to speak to his attorney and get permission first, or have a conversation with her, right?
Yes.
Did Trooper DeChico say why he wanted to look through the defendant's phone?
Yes, we wanted to establish a permanent timeline and get a tone of Ana.
During the interview, was there any conversation about conducting a forensic interview of the children?
Yes.
What was discussed?
We explained what it was, and we had scheduled one for the following day at 10 a.m.
After the interview, what was done as far as searching the home?
We got consent from Mr. Walshe to search the home.
And when you got consent, what areas of the home did you check?
The entire home.
And what access did you have to the attic?
We checked the attic.
Did you find anything in the attic?
Nothing of remark.
And what, if anything, did you notice between the attic and the bedroom of Mr. Walshe?
There was a hole in the drywall in the ceiling.
Now, besides looking inside the home, did you have access to the pool?
Yes.
And what was done as far as looking at the pool that night?
We used flashlights to look into the pool again.
And you say again, did you have the opportunity to look at it the night before?
Yes.
Was anything ever recovered from the pool?
No.
And now, that night, did you have the opportunity to look into any of the vehicles again?
Yes.
Which vehicle?
The Volvo XC90.
And the Volvo XC90, who gave you permission to look into it?
Mr. Walshe.
And what was noticed as far as anything inside what did you notice about the Volvo that night on the 5th?
Inside was a receipt from Lowe's dated the 4th, and there was a cell phone.
Did Mr. Walshe tell you who the phone belonged to?
His oldest son.
After having the opportunity, in addition to looking at the house, looking outside the house, did you go to anywhere else as far as at that address to look around for Miss Walshe?
We checked the trash barrels that line the driveway.
Did you find anything in the trash barrels?
No.
After doing all that, where'd you go?
Back to the police headquarters.
What did you do back at Cohasset Police Headquarters?
We attempted to contact financial institutions that might have recent activity.
And about what time do you think you got back to Cohasset PD?
Approximately 10:30 p.m. maybe.
So now on January 6th, Friday, what happened to the forensic interview of the children?
It was canceled.
And what was done by state police to bring in more resources?
A large-scale search was started. We brought in command posts, the state police search and rescue team, the metro search and rescue team, and area detectives on mutual aid.
Now, did anyone conduct a press conference on January 6th from your department?
Yes.
Who?
Chief Quigley.
And how do you characterize this case at the press conference?
A missing persons investigation.
Right now, it's a missing persons investigation, and we automatically feel that she's in danger by the mere fact that she's missing. Again, the husband's been very cooperative, but our main focus today is trying to locate Anna.
On January 6th, did you have the opportunity to speak to anyone who saw Ana Walshe and Brian Walshe on December 31st?
Yes.
Who'd you speak to?
Jem Mutlu.
And
What's the last name?
Mutlu, Your Honor.
Can you spell it?
Mutlu.
And where did this conversation occur?
Cohasset Police Headquarters.
And who was with you for this conversation?
Trooper Chico.
During this conversation, what did he tell you as far as his relationship to Ana Walshe?
A previous co-worker and friend.
And what time did he get to does he believe he got to the Walshe home that night on New Year's Eve?
I don't recall what time he got there.
Did he say what interaction he had with the children that night?
Yes.
What interaction did he have with the children that night?
The oldest child had come down the stairs, and he took a photo with the oldest child and Ana Walshe.
And did he say whose phone they took it with, if you remember?
I don't recall.
And after the oldest child came downstairs, was there any further interaction with the children?
No.
What time did he say he left?
After 1 a.m., between 1 and 1:30.
What did he say the demeanor was of everyone there?
Good.
Now, who on January 6th was working on speaking with Mr. Walsh's attorney about getting access to his cell phone?
Sergeant Bukhenik.
And do you know if any digital devices were obtained from Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
What day?
Friday.
The 6th?
Friday the 6th.
And were you there when they were obtained?
No.
Now, do you know when those devices were returned?
Saturday.
The 7th.
Correct.
Now, did you have the opportunity to speak with the defendant again on January 7th?
I did.
Approximately what time?
2 p.m.
And where did this conversation take place?
His residence again.
And who was at the residence when you had this conversation with him?
His attorney.
And do you know her name?
Attorney Tracy Miner.
In addition to yourself, the defendant, and Attorney Miner, was anyone else there for the interview?
Yes.
And who else was there?
Trooper DeChico and Trooper Proctor.
Now, did you have the opportunity to hear the recording of that interview?
Yes.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the interview as it occurred that day on January 7th?
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity to review the transcript?
Yes.
And does the transcript fairly reflect the audio recording?
It does.
Is there anything missing?
There's certain discernible parts, and at one point in time, a dog's barking in the background that's not in the transcript.
Are you familiar with what Viber is?
Yes.
What is Viber?
A communication app.
And what is WhatsApp?
Also a communications app.
What did the defendant say that Ms. Walsh had as far as access to Viber and WhatsApp?
She would use those apps.
And what access did the defendant say that Ms. Walsh had to Instagram?
She would use them. She would use Facebook.
What access did the defendant have to Ms. Walsh's passwords when you were talking to him?
They shared some financial passwords.
And what access did she have to, well, first off, what is Venmo?
It was an app that you can transfer money to and from.
And what access did she say that she had to Venmo?
She has Venmo.
Now, in addition to these applications, what did he tell you as far as financial institutions she would use?
They would use Apple Credit Union, Liberty Bay, Fidelity, Chase, JetBlue credit card.
And how would she conduct her finances?
Online banking.
During the interview, at any point in time, did Attorney Miner interrupt the defendant?
Yes.
And what did she say when she interrupted him?
Don't talk about our communications.
Now, did the defendant tell you how he would obtain permission to leave the home when dealing with federal authorities?
Through email.
And what would he do as far as contacting them via email? What would he ask?
There was a scheduled time, and requests need to be made 72 hours out. And if there's an emergency request would have to be through email.
And did he say anything as far as your ability to review those emails?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said we could review those emails.
And what did Attorney Miner say at this point in time?
We could review those emails.
Now, what did the defendant tell you as far as his whereabouts on January 1st, 2023?
He was home.
And did he leave the home at any time?
Yes.
Where did he go?
He went to Shaw's to get orange juice and milk.
And once he went to Shaw's and got those items, where did he go?
He returned home.
Did he leave the home again on January 1st?
Yes.
Where did he say he went?
To visit his mother at 330 Paradise Road in Swampscott.
Did he say what happened on his way to Swampscott?
He got lost.
In addition to going to visit his mother, did he go to anywhere else in that area?
Yes, he went to Whole Foods and CVS.
And besides those stores, did he tell you any other locations he went to on the 1st?
There was discussion of possibly going to a Walgreens.
Now, what did he tell you as far as where he went on January 2nd?
To Norwell to get ice cream with his son.
And during this interview, did anyone ask him about the name Richard Walker?
Yes.
Who asked about Richard Walker?
Trooper DeChico.
And did he know Richard Walker?
No.
What was the significance to you at this point in time of the name Richard Walker?
I had received an email with a ransom request from an email address with the name Richard Walker.
And when had you received this email in relation to the interview that you were conducting with the defendant at this point in time on January 7th?
Before.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Sergeant, I'm showing you a copy. Is that the email you received from with the name Richard Walker attached to it?
It is.
Did you read the body of the email?
We have the so-named Ana Walshe with us here. We had a deal worth $127,000. She messed up. We have her here with us, and if she doesn't pay the money, then she'll never be back. And we know that the police and the FBI are involved. Good luck finding us.
I'm going to have that back. Besides Trooper DeChico mentioning that name once, was there any further discussion of Richard Walker or the substance or even the substance of the email?
No.
Now, what did the defendant tell you as far as Mrs. Walsh's use of Uber or Lyft?
That she would use them Uber 1 and Lyft 2.
Is there preferences?
Yes.
While you were conducting the interview, did anyone arrive?
Yes.
Who arrived?
Abdullah.
And what happened once that gentleman arrived?
Attorney Miner advised Mr. Walsh to get him to leave.
And what did Mr. Walsh do?
He went to the door and got him to leave.
And was the defendant ever asked how Ana Walshe would communicate if she lost her cell phone?
Yes.
What did he say?
He didn't know at first.
And then did anyone ask him about using an iPad?
Yes.
And what did he say if I had lost her phone, what access how she would communicate using an iPad?
He said that's right, she would use an iPad.
Now, what did the defendant tell you as far as how Ana would communicate with JetBlue?
He related they wouldn't have good luck calling, so she would use the chat function on the online website.
And did Attorney Miner have any comments at this point in time about contacting JetBlue via the online chat function?
Yes, she said that she uses JetBlue and uses the online website chat feature.
And did the defendant have any questions for you at this point in time accessing this information?
Yes, he asked if we had reviewed the JetBlue chatter.
Now, was there ever a discussion of Ana Walshe making a brunch reservation for January 1st?
Yes.
And the defendant didn't have any knowledge of a brunch reservation at this point in time, correct?
Yes.
But did he say how she would have made that reservation if she was going to?
Through the apps Resi or OpenTable.
Now, how long was this interview?
About 2 hours.
And after that interview was over, what did you do?
We checked the area for security footage to try and corroborate any vehicles coming or going.
And so how do you do that?
Neighborhood canvas.
Now, were you ever informed about the contents of any of the digital devices on January 7th, that's Saturday?
Yes.
About what time were you informed?
6:30 p.m.
And how were you informed?
A phone call.
From who?
One of the CPAC troopers.
What were you notified of?
There was suspicious browser history.
Now, this is January 7th, and now I want to ask you some questions about January 8th.
Okay.
On the morning of January 8th, did you have the opportunity to be present when a search warrant was executed in Cohasset?
Yes.
Where was it executed?
The residence.
516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway.
Correct.
And who was executing the search warrant?
The CPAC unit with conjunction with the Cohasset Police.
And who was home at the residence when the search warrant was executed?
Mr. Walsh, the 3 children, and his mother.
Now, when the warrant was executed, did anyone arrive to assist Mr. Walsh after the warrant was first served?
Attorney Miner.
About how long did it take for her to arrive?
15 minutes.
And once Attorney Miner arrived, what was done with the family and Mr. Walsh?
We moved car seats around so they could leave the premises with Attorney Miner.
And did you ever have the opportunity to participate in a 4th interview of the defendant on that day, Sunday, January 8th?
Yes.
And where did that occur?
Attorney Miner's residence in Situate.
And about what time did that occur?
About 11 a.m.
And who was present for that interview?
Myself, Trooper DeChico, Trooper Proctor, Attorney Miner, and Mr. Walsh.
And during the interview, what was discussed?
The browser search history.
And what did the defendant say he would do with the iPad as far as helping the children?
He would put on spooky movies for him.
And did he say he did anything else with the iPad?
No.
How long did this interview go on for?
Just over 10 minutes.
Who stopped the interview?
Attorney Miner.
And once the interview was terminated by Attorney Miner, what did you do?
I shut off the recorder and we left.
And did you ever have the opportunity to see Mr. Walsh again that day?
Yes.
About what time?
4 p.m.
And where did you see him?
Attorney Miner's residence.
And what were you doing at Attorney Miner's residence at 4 p.m. on January 8th, Sunday?
I placed him in custody.
And where was he taken to once he was placed into custody?
Cohasset Police Headquarters.
He was booked there?
He was.
On January 4th, which was Wednesday, the first day you met Mr. Walsh, what did he say to you about looking at anything on his phone?
We could look at anything if it would help.
And on the 5th, actually, I'll ask this in the 4th, did he ever tell you what access Ana had of his phone on January 4th?
On the 4th, he said that Ana would use his would use his phone, and that she would send photos from his phone to herself if she liked them.
On the 5th, how did you get the Volvo open?
He provided the keys to us.
And what was the difference in the Volvo from the 4th to the 5th?
The plastic sheeting in the trunk was not there.
When you arranged the interview interviews with the defendant How would you do it? Would you call him? Would you just show up? What was your process?
Both occurred.
And who was the person that canceled the forensic interview of the children on January 6th?
Mr. Walsh.
Are you aware of what time Mr. Walsh's devices were returned to him on January 7th?
Would have been around the time of the interview.
Before it began?
Before it began.
And did he describe for you on that Saturday, January 7th interview of what happened as far as getting lost that day going to his mother's residence?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He said he did not have his cell phone with him, so he took the wrong route.
And what did he say as far as the location of his cell phone from January 1 into January 2?
His children had moved it. He didn't know where it was.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Cross-examination.
Were you present on January 6th of 2023 when devices were retrieved from Mr. Walsh?
No.
Were you present on January 7th of 2023 when the devices were returned to Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
When you talked on direct examination about this plastic sheet that was in the rear of the Volvo SUV, you were just asked a question a moment ago about how when you looked at the Volvo a second time on another day, the plastic sheet was missing.
Correct.
It's fair to say, and it's accurate to say, isn't it, that at that moment, Mr. Walsh was asked about the missing plastic sheet, and he pointed to the officers and said, "It's in the trash."
Yes.
Did you go and retrieve the plastic sheet in the trash?
No.
You've described, based on your review of the tape interviews that you were present for, that the taped interviews are an accurate representation of what happened, and the transcript is an accurate representation of what was stated during those interviews, correct?
Yes.
And you've said repeatedly that there was background noise, correct?
Correct.
And the background noise included dog barking, correct?
Yes.
And that dog's name is Luna?
Hans.
And it's the name of the dog.
Dog's name is Hans?
Dog's name is Hans.
Okay.
The dog, when you listen to those taped recordings, you can hear that barking go on and off during different periods of time during the recording, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, when you listen to those recordings, you can hear other people talking in the background.
Yes.
And it's fair to say then that during these interviews that you testified to under direct examination, there were times when it was hard to even hear what was going on, correct?
Can you repeat that, please?
There were times during these interviews that you testified to on direct examination, and let's focus on the interview of January 5th and the interview of January 7th. There were times when it was even hard to hear everything that was going on.
Yes.
It's also accurate, isn't it, that when you began asking Mr. Walsh questions on January 5th, there is a statement that is made that people are very loud, made in the context of all this background noise.
I'm sorry. I don't understand. Was that a question?
But you said you reviewed the transcript, right?
I do. I just don't understand the question.
That, in fact, in the transcript, there's a specific reference to people being very loud.
I don't recall.
And as I'm looking for that, I'll just keep asking you questions till I find it. Page 19. Mr. Walsh showed you that he was having a hard time sleeping, correct?
Yes.
Said he was having a hard time thinking, correct?
Yes.
He told you that, and this is on January 5th, he told you, "I didn't sleep well last night."
Yes.
He told you, hopefully he tried to get some sleep that night, January 5th.
I don't recall that portion.
All right. And at one point, now your rank now is what?
Sergeant.
So start to call you Detective Sergeant Schmidt. At one point at the beginning of this interview, you in fact stated that you were getting distracted.
Which interview? I'm sorry.
January 5th. January 5th.
Yes.
And that distraction, once again, was the result of all this background noise and the dog barking and things like that.
Yes.
I want to jump to this email that was introduced into evidence regarding Richard Walker. When did you first come into possession of that email?
It was sent to me with the timestamp on the email. I believe it was early morning hours of the 7th.
Okay. You knew nothing about Richard Walker and this email before you received it?
Correct.
And once you received it, did you conduct some kind of investigation?
I notified my supervisors that I had received it.
When you refer, during this testimony regarding this motion, when you refer to supervisors, are you referring to Cohasset Police Department supervisors? Are you referring to Mass State Police?
Cohasset Police Supervisor.
Okay, and who would that be?
Detective Lieutenant Lopes.
Lopes.
Yes.
So Detective Lieutenant Lopes was your supervisor?
Correct.
Okay. So did you talk to Mr. Walsh on January 5th and ask him questions then about this Richard Walker email? And I gather the answer is no, correct? On January 5th.
What was the date?
January 5th.
Okay.
Not on the 5th.
And you first asked him questions on January 7th, correct?
Trooper DeChico did.
Okay. Were you present?
I was.
And did you ask to look at his phone to see if he had any text messages or anything from Richard Walker?
Not specific to Richard Walker.
Okay. And that was the end of that conversation, basically, on January 7th regarding Richard Walker.
Yes.
You testified on direct examination that during the January 5th interview, at some point, Trooper Chico asked if he could look at the contents of Mr. Walsh's phone.
Yes.
When he made that request, he being Trooper DeChico, he didn't make any other request at that time to look at any iPad, correct?
Correct.
And he didn't make any type of request to look at anything like a MacBook or anything of that sort, correct?
Correct.
And when you testified on direct examination that Trooper DeChico said our words to the effect of we want to download the entire contents. You were talking about the entire contents of the cell phone?
Correct.
It was explained to Mr. Walsh, though, at that point, wasn't it, that what you were looking for, and when I say you, I'm talking about you and Trooper DeChico and people who were involved in this January 5th interview. You specifically told Mr. Walsh at that time that you wanted to look at information to try to understand Ana.
Yes.
And you specifically said in that same sentence, and when I apologize, Trooper DeChico specifically said, look through your phone and consent to us downloading your phone and seeing some of the communications between you and her, correct?
Correct.
And her meaning Ana Walshe.
Yes.
And then you referred to on direct examination to the use of tone. The Trooper DeChico said something about her tone, correct?
Yes.
Now, Sergeant Schmidt, fair to say, isn't it, that when Mr. Walsh is being told we want to look at the tone, I mean, what that references, isn't it, is to see if whatever communications you might find on the phone, if they were communications that showed some anger, or some happiness, or some argument, or something like that, correct?
Correct.
And so you wanted to see if the communications that you were talking to Mr. Walsh about at that moment, if they indicated something like any arguing going on between the two, or in fact the opposite. If the communications that they were talking to Mr. Walsh about were affectionate and showed no signs of arguing. That's fair to say, isn't it?
Yes.
And Trooper DeChico then went further and said, yeah, we want to look at things like if there are things that were sent and received on your phone, correct?
Yes.
Sent and received, and that is in the context of communication.
Yes.
Now, then this request of Mr. Walsh goes on, and Trooper DeChico then says, or asks Mr. Walsh, it'd be helpful and we can create a permanent timeline of the events of the 1st, the 31st, and the 1st, and maybe get a better insight into Ana, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh was asked, are you okay with that, correct?
I don't explicitly remember that part.
Do you remember Mr. Walsh saying anything of the sort like, just to be clear, you want to download everything on my phone?
Yes.
So it's fair to say that the first time Trooper DeChico mentioned downloading all the contents of the phone, Mr. Walsh began to ask questions about all the content? It's fair to say that, isn't it?
Correct.
At no time in this exchange that we just discussed in this cross-examination, this exchange that occurred on January 5th, when the subject was first brought up to look through Mr. Walsh's phone, there was no conversation or request to look at anything like location data, was it?
No.
You never said, and Trooper DeChico never asked, if he could look at the phone contents for anything like search history or anything of the sort, correct?
Correct.
In fact, the only subject matter, the only characterization of the subject matter that Trooper DeChico talked about and asked Mr. Walsh about used the word communications, correct?
I think I'd have to refer to the transcript to make a definitive agreement with that.
Right? By the way, Judge, if I may, I apologize. I'd like to inquire if Trooper DeChico is in fact going to testify. I thought we were told he was, but I know today.
Well, we'll get to the.
I don't intend to call.
Then it's fair to say, isn't it, that when Mr. Walsh asked about the entire contents, he was told by Trooper DeChico that we will download, with the extraction, we'll download all the contents to your phone, yes, right?
Yes.
Trooper DeChico never stated that they were going to review or analyze or look at the entire contents of his phone, did he?
Correct.
And then Mr. Walsh said something to the effect of, that's a lot.
Yes.
And then, it's fair to say, isn't it, that you said something to the effect of, well, what we're focusing on is, well, we're interested in, yes, it downloads everything. This is you talking. But what we're interested in is locating Ana and finding the information specifically in there that would help us do that. The Ana-specific content, correct?
Yes.
And in that statement you made to Mr. Walsh, you never said anything, you, Sergeant Schmidt, you never said anything about looking at search history or location data or anything of the sort, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Walsh then once again said something to the effect of, well, that's a huge amount of data.
Yes.
He was asked about what his concern was, correct?
Yes.
And he actually first responded, I don't know, correct?
I don't recall that.
Do you recall him being asked during this particular part of the January 5th, 2023 interview that he was asked, well, are there other legal issues? If you remember that. And if you don't, it's fine.
Trooper Chico did say that.
He asked him that.
He asked if it was the other legal issues.
And do you recall what Mr. Walsh responded?
In the affirmative.
He said that's one of them, correct? And if you don't remember, I don't want to put words in your mouth. If you don't remember, that's fine.
Correct, yeah. Excuse me, I don't remember that exact exchange.
Does that refresh your memory?
It does.
And it refreshes your memory that at some point Trooper DeGico said, in fact, is it your other legal issues? And Mr. Walsh said that's one of them.
Yes.
And in fact, while Mr. Walsh said, I'm willing to do anything, that his only request was basically he wanted to first talk to Tracy Miner, correct?
Correct.
Was that the first time, Sergeant Schmidt, that you became aware of the fact that Mr. Walsh was represented by counsel?
No.
When did you first learn that he was represented by counsel?
The interview on the 4th.
Were you provided contact information on January 4th of 2023 of Mr. Walsh's attorney?
No.
Did you ask for it?
No.
Did you learn about Mr. Walsh being represented by counsel through Mr. Walsh or some other source?
Mr. Walsh.
So when you learned that he was represented by counsel, Sergeant, did you pause and consider reaching out to his counsel instead of continuing to ask him questions?
At what point in time?
On January 4th, when you said you first learned about him being represented by Tracy Miner.
No.
But on January 5th, when he told you his only request would be because Tracy Miner called me today about what's going on, you asked him, who is that?
Correct.
And that was on January 5th.
Correct.
So even though you asked Mr. Walsh on January 5th, who is that, when he used the name Tracy Miner, you're telling us today that you learned about Tracy Miner representing Mr. Walsh on January 4th.
No. If I may explain.
Sure.
Mr. Walsh related that he had an attorney on the 4th. However, she was not named. I learned about the name on the 5th during that second interview.
Okay. But you did learn that he was represented by counsel on the 4th, is what your testimony is here today.
Yes.
Is that exchange, when you learned about Mr. Walsh being represented by counsel on January 4th, is that contained in the January 4th interview?
I don't recall.
Well, were there conversations other than with Patrol Officer Lowrance with Mr. Walsh on January 4th that contain statements that don't appear in the interview transcript or in any of the reports?
Yes.
And have you ever been asked to reduce to writing statements of Mr. Walsh that otherwise don't appear in your reports or Lawrence's reports or in the January 4th transcript of your conversation with him?
No.
What other statements can you tell this court about that Mr. Walsh made to you on January 4th that did not find their way into any report or into any transcript?
There's conversations about the house and rental property when we did the walkthroughs of the premises.
All right. Anything else that you recall?
Not at the moment.
All right. It's fair to say then that your memory of any other statements that do not appear in reports or in the transcript, those were not statements that included Mr. Walsh saying, you can look at the entire contents of my phone, you can look at anything you want, or words to that effect, correct?
Correct.
By the way, Sergeant Schmidt, did you ever have any conversations with a district attorney named Lynn Beelan about this case?
I don't recall any.
All right. Do you know who Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beelan was or is?
Yes.
Had you interacted with her in other Norfolk County cases?
No.
So your conversations with Assistant District Attorney Beeland would be limited to this particular case or this investigation?
I don't recall any communications with her.
Okay, how about conversation?
Related to this case, no.
Okay. So I guess it's fair to say that you never had any conversations with Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beeland regarding any agreement to search any devices, correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Walshe made it very clear to you during this question and answer during the interview on January 5th that he wanted to talk and needed to talk to his attorney, Tracy Miner, correct?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And he made it very clear that he had to talk to his attorney, Tracy Miner, before he agreed to anything about turning over his phone, correct?
Correct.
And once again, that discussion, when I just limited it to his phone, his iPhone, this discussion about talking to Tracy Miner didn't include any reference to searching any iPad or iPads or MacBooks, correct?
Not that he discussed with me.
So I'll return to the subject matter, but what I want to ask you, Sergeant Schmidt, is this. When you were there present with Trooper DeChico and you're interviewing Mr. Walshe on January 5th. Now, you've already interviewed him earlier in the day before. And as a police officer with training and experience, you would, in fact, be interested in looking at communications between Mr. Walshe and the missing spouse, correct?
Yes.
And it's fair to say, isn't it, that you'd also be interested in seeing, if you could, any communications that Mr. Walshe attempted to have with Ana Walshe after January 1st, correct?
Yes.
And you would be interested in looking for any communications Ana Walshe attempted to contact her husband, Mr. Walshe, after January 1st, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And you would be interested, wouldn't you, in looking at communications that Mr. Walshe made to anyone after January 1st regarding the whereabouts of his wife, correct?
Can you just describe that one more time? I'm sorry.
You would be interested in looking at communication of Mr. Walshe trying to talk to others and inquire about the whereabouts of his wife, Ana Walshe.
Yes.
And in fact, Mr. Walshe told you, didn't he, that he had first reached out to Ana Walshe and tried to text her when his phone was found, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you were asked questions on direct examination about this phone, his phone, being lost, you are aware of the fact, aren't you, that the phone was found by one of his young children, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, it was found after this nanny, I think you referred to her as Robin.
Robin.
After she had searched trash barrels and things looking for that phone, correct?
Yes.
And one of the reasons they were looking in trash barrels is because that had happened before, correct?
Correct.
The kids or one or more of Mr. Walsh's children had taken his phone or Anna's phone and put it in a trash can and hid it, correct?
Correct.
So getting back to your experience as a police officer and an investigator, it's fair to say that there would be interest in looking at communications from Mr. Walshe, not just on December 31st of 2022 and January 1st of 2023, but communications that went and extended past the 1st, possibly the 2nd, correct?
Yes.
Now, returning now to the specifics of the January 5th interview, one of the things that Mr. Walshe told you when you were asking about downloading the contents of his phone was, aside from there was an enormous amount of information and things like that, he said that he needed to talk to Tracy Miner, his attorney, to see if she might say, can we just do the information that you're asking for, correct?
Yes.
And up to this point, when that statement was made by Mr. Walshe, the only subject matter that had been discussed with him, either through you or Trooper DeChico, was communication, correct?
We talked about downloading all the contents of the phone and communications to set the tone.
Right, but I understand that. But once again, just going back to some earlier direct and cross-examination, when the comment was made, yes, we want to download the entire contents of the phone, either you or Trooper DeChico then immediately said, but really all we're looking for is information about Ana Walshe. And once again, you talked about communications, correct?
Yes.
So even if in the context of we want to download the entire contents of your phone, in the same context of that statement, it was made, we're looking for communications, correct?
Yes.
And we're looking for communications and Anna's tone, correct?
Yes.
Now, was there some explanation to Mr. Walshe at this point in the January 5th interview where Trooper DeChico starts telling Mr. Walshe something about your concerns? I think we need a search warrant for that information to be used against you. Remember that?
I do.
Now, you tell the court why that was made at that time when Mr. Walshe was informing both you and Trooper DeChico that he had concerns about having you download all this information. Objection.
Sustained.
Well, were you trying to convince Mr. Walshe that whatever you found on the phone would not be used against him?
No.
Then what was the purpose of telling him that you would need to have a search warrant? Objection.
Sustained. He didn't say it. The other guy did.
He didn't say it.
This witness didn't say it. How can he know what the other witness's intention was, right?
Objection. He didn't say it.
He's hearing it just like everybody else. Unless I've got the facts wrong. He's not the speaker. You have to ask the speaker what his intention was.
Okay, let me ask you this. I understand.
That's why I'm sustaining the objection. Next question.
Let me ask you this. Do you know why Trooper DeChico at that moment in time made that comment about search warrants?
No.
Did you ever ask
No.
Trooper DeChico about that?
I did not.
Was it confusing to you?
No.
But you don't know why he asked it.
Correct.
Mr. Walshe did tell you that he used his phone for work.
Yes.
And he did tell you, first, the effect of he was concerned about how long you might have to have his phone, correct?
Yes.
And then he was informed that, they have a mobile unit and maybe they can come out to your house, correct?
Yes.
And his response to that was great, wasn't it?
Correct.
So it's fair to say that Mr. Walshe was told that since he had concerns about how long they might have his phone, they could actually come out to his house and conduct extraction at his home with a mobile unit, correct?
Correct.
And do you know, Sergeant Schmidt, if in fact they brought a mobile unit out to Mr. Walsh's home on January 6th?
Not to my knowledge.
And then Mr. Walshe tells both you and Trooper DeChico that his only request is to talk to Tracy, his attorney, and to let her know and to give her his risk exposure, right?
Correct.
So it's fair to say that based on what you were hearing Mr. Walshe say, it was clear to you, wasn't it, Sergeant Schmidt, that he was not going to agree to turn over his phone or have it reviewed unless and until he talked to Tracy Miner. Objection.
I'll let him have that one.
Yes.
At this point in the January 5th interview, is it fair to say that you, Sergeant Schmidt, you begin to interject and say, just so you're aware, if any peace of mind, we don't have a crime.
Yes, I did say that.
And we're not investigating a crime. This is a missing person.
Correct.
Can you tell the court why you, Sergeant Schmidt, made those statements at that time to Mr. Walshe?
It was the truth.
And what was the significance to you of making those statements?
He wasn't the subject of an investigation. We were there as a community caretaking function to assist in finding a missing person.
Was that statement that you made to Mr. Walshe at that time, was that an effort to reassure him that what you found, if you found anything on the phone, that it couldn't be used against him without a search warrant? Was that you suggesting that to Mr. Walshe?
No, I wasn't thinking like that during that conversation.
Were you trying to reassure him that whatever you found on the phone, you, Sergeant Schmidt, would not intend to use it against him?
I was trying to tell him exactly why we were there.
Now, so at this point, after it became clear that Mr. Walshe was asking to talk to his attorney, Tracy Miner, before he made any agreements regarding his phone, then the subject matter of the inquiry on January 5th changed. You started asking other questions relative to your investigation, correct?
Yes.
It's fair to say that during this January 5th interview that you were present for, that you never asked Mr. Walshe anything about search histories or anything of the sort that might be on his phone, correct?
Correct.
And you never asked him anything about what is referred to as location data, correct?
Correct.
In the January 7th interview, for the first time, Mr. Walshe was told, it's important for us to create a timeline for you to avoid suspicion, correct? Words to that effect?
Yes.
That statement about creating a timeline to avoid suspicion being placed on Mr. Walshe, that was first made on January 7th, correct?
Yes.
And that was the evening of January 7th, correct?
The interview?
Yes.
No.
Okay. What time was the January 7th interview?
About 2 p.m.
Okay. Afternoon.
Afternoon.
And it went on for quite some time.
About 2 hours.
And up to that point, on January 5th, it was never suggested that you needed to establish some kind of timeline to avoid suspicion. That subject matter never came up on January 5th.
Correct.
It never came up on January 4th, correct?
Correct.
And when that suggestion was first made to Mr. Walshe on January 7th, the devices had already been turned over, correct?
This is the 7th?
Yes.
Yes.
And in fact, when that statement was made to Mr. Walshe on January 7th, the devices had actually already been returned to Mr. Walshe, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, when that statement was made to Mr. Walshe on January 7th, what's been referred to as an agreement as to what could be searched on the devices that had already been reached, correct?
To my understanding.
Okay. Because when you say to my understanding, it's because you weren't involved in those, quote, negotiations, were you?
Correct.
Did you ever see an email exchange between Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beelan and Attorney Tracy Miner?
Not at the time.
Not at the time.
Not at the time. I may have seen it since, but not at the time.
Okay, at the time, when you say not at the time, we're talking about up to at least January 7th of 2023.
Correct.
And so it's fair to say that, is it fair to say, Sergeant, that on January 7th, when that was made, that comment about coming up with a timeline to avoid suspicion, you have no idea if that subject matter was included in the so-called agreement, correct?
Correct.
All you know is that that subject matter of coming up with a timeline to avoid suspicion was first made and broached on January 7th, 2023.
Yes.
Did you have any conversation on January 5th of 2023 about one of the children's iPads being broken or not working correct?
On the 5th. I don't recall.
Were you present at the house, Mr. Walsh's house, on January 6th of 2023?
At the moment, I don't recall specifically being there Friday the 6th.
You do or do not?
I do not.
It's fair to say you didn't write any report about being present on January 6th, correct? Being present on January 6th.
I don't recall writing a report about being present on January 6th, the 5th. Excuse me, Friday the 6th.
You didn't write a report?
I don't remember writing a report about that.
So is it fair to say that you weren't involved in all the searches that were going on January 6th at Mr. Walsh's home?
I was.
Oh, I see. So do you now remember being present on?
I was involved in the searching at the command post down the street.
Okay, but not at the home.
Correct.
Let me ask you this, Sergeant Schmidt. How long had you been a detective with Cohasset Police Department up to January of 2023?
About 8 years.
And it's fair to say in those 8 years, you had to try to perhaps get someone's consent to turn over a device, correct?
Yes.
And sometimes those devices might include a cell phone, or search of a car, or anything like that, correct?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that Cohasset Police Department has a form that might be entitled consent to search or anything like that?
Yes.
And the reason for using a form like that, consent to search, is to make sure that there is a record evidence that the person you're asking for consent from, that they give their consent voluntarily.
Yes.
And you have a document that reflects that, correct?
Correct.
And in that document of consent to search, it'd be fair to say that you would also include what the parameters of the search is going to be, correct?
Yes.
And you do that because you don't want there to be any confusion down the road about what the person agreed to and what the person didn't agree to, correct?
Correct.
And one of the reasons you don't want that problem to arise is because you don't want your investigation, in whatever case those are, you don't want your investigation to be compromised and questioned whether that person actually gave their voluntary consent, correct?
Correct.
Have you ever seen in this case whether there was ever a consent to search any device used by either yourself, Cohasset Police Department, or the Mass State Police?
You asking about a form?
Yeah.
I did not see a form.
Have you ever worked with the Mass State Police in conjunction with any other case where you've seen them use a consent to search form?
I don't recall a specific investigation.
And specific to this case, though, and the consent to search, it's fair to say you didn't have any conversations with Attorney Tracy Miner. I don't know why I keep saying the name wrong. Tracy Miner, regarding Mr. Walshe consenting to any search.
Correct.
When you were talking and Trooper DeChico was talking and asking Mr. Walshe questions on January 5th, we all agree that the only subject matter that was referenced specifically was, quote, communications, correct?
Yes.
And when you use that word communication, you are in fact, is it fair to say you're talking about things like text messages?
Yes.
and maybe voicemails,
Yes.
emails,
Yes.
and you're really, when you use that word, communication, you're just using it in its common parlance, correct? Communication. Discussions between one person and another person are persons, correct?
I'd say that just the sharing of information is communication.
Between two people. Okay. When you were asked questions on direct examination about someone by the name of Abdullah coming to the house, did you conduct any further investigation of this person named Abdullah?
Further from that moment?
Yes.
I did not.
Okay. Is it fair to say, Sergeant Schmidt, that in the January 5th interview that you participated in of Mr. Walshe, that the phrase, quote, marital privilege was never used?
I don't recall it being used.
Okay. And is it fair to say, Detective Schmidt, that during the entire interview of January 5th, the only dates that were discussed in your presence during this interview was December 31st, January 1st, and in the days thereafter? Words to that effect, correct? Yeah. Do you recall, Sergeant Schmidt, if anything was referenced in that January 5th interview about looking at data back to December 25th of 2022?
I don't recall that in the interview.
I just have a brief moment. Okay. That's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
A few, Your Honor. What was done to investigate the Richard Walker email?
The forensic specialists of the state police conducted a search warrant for Google and the records they hold to look into that email address.
And the Richard Walker email, just to record, when did that come to you again?
The morning of the 7th.
And also, sir, when you were asked about Abdullah on cross-examination, did you ever have the opportunity to interview that individual?
I did.
When?
I believe it was the 5th.
And during the interview of January 5th, what difficulty did you have hearing the defendant when you were discussing looking through or downloading his phone?
None.
And in addition to discussing the tone and communications, what was discussed as far as timeline when looking through his phone?
It would help investigators establish a permanent timeline.
And, sir, you were asked questions about communications when in digital devices. What do you consider an online chat via web page?
Communication.
What was Attorney Miner representing the defendant for when you were discussing her initially?
A federal investigation.
And when you were there, what involvement did you have with this federal investigation when you were interviewing the defendant?
None.
And so why were you interviewing the defendant these days?
To find a missing person, Ana Walshe.
What knowledge did you have about the federal investigation when you went to interview him?
Or what he had told me.
On the car, sir, when you were asked about, he said it was in the plastic sheet was in the trash. Did you see the plastic sheet?
No.
And what did you notice as far as any difference in the car when you looked at it?
There were like vacuum, what I would assume were vacuum marks, like if you have the different swipes on the carpet.
Nothing further on.
Any recross?
Brief. You never used the word in context of communications in asking Mr. Walshe questions, something about online chat and web page, did you?
During the interview?
Yes.
No.
What do you mean by that?
I don't understand the question.
You were asked just now on redirect if you considered communications online chat and web pages, and your answer was yes.
Yes.
What are you referring to?
You'd be communicating and sharing information between people through an online chat function on a website.
Okay. In all the discussions you had with Mr. Walshe based on grounded in January 4th, January 5th, and even on January 7th, there was no discussion about online chats using a particular web page, was there?
Not a particular web page, but the JetBlue specifically.
And you went to JetBlue. Did you go to JetBlue and talk to them about information relative to Ana Walshe?
I did not.
Do you know who did?
Initially, patrol units had requested the state police assigned to Logan Airport to coordinate with JetBlue to see if there were any travel records.
Okay. Isn't it fair to say then that with regards and specifically to any web chat on a web page, that the Mass State Police learned that there was nothing communicated between Ana Walshe and JetBlue on or around December 31st, January 1st, or thereafter?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's all I
All right. The witness may step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, sir. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you state your name and spell your first and last name, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Yuriy Bukhenik, spelled Y-U-R-I-Y, last of B-U-K-H-E-N-I-K.
Where do you work, sir?
I work for the Massachusetts State Police, currently assigned to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office.
How long have you been with Massachusetts Police?
I graduated the academy March of 2012.
And how long have you been attached to the detectives unit with the District Attorney's Office?
10 years.
And what is your current rank?
I'm a sergeant.
And how long have you been a sergeant within that unit?
Since December of 2021.
So I'm going to ask some questions now about January 5th of 2023, Thursday. That day, did you have the opportunity to be dispatched to Cohasset?
Yes.
Why were you dispatched to Cohasset?
Cohasset police detectives reached out to our office requesting assistance in investigating a missing person case.
What was the name of the person you researched that you were asked to assist help find?
The person's name was Ana Walshe.
About what time did you get to Cohasset PD that day?
It was in the late afternoon, I would say approximately 4:45 or so.
And did anyone else besides you, that's a member of the State Police Detectives Unit with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, respond to Cohasset that evening?
Yes.
Who else?
Trooper DeChico.
And once Trooper DeChico and you were at the Cohasset PD, who did you have the opportunity to speak with?
I spoke with Detective Harrison Schmidt of Cohasset PD.
And what was the purpose of this meeting with Detective Schmidt?
He gave us an update on his investigation into the missing person, shared the details of that he's learned since he was involved. Did
you have the opportunity to review anything in addition to having the conversation with Detective Schmidt?
Yes, I was able to review an audio recording of Brian Walshe's interview.
And after having this meeting and reviewing the recording, what did you have the opportunity to do next in your investigation?
After doing the review of the recording and being updated on all the information that Cohasset PD had at the time, myself, Trooper DeChico, Detective Schmidt, Detective Lieutenant Lopes, and Sergeant Hunt proceeded to 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway in Cohasset.
About what time did all of you arrive at that address?
I believe it was like 6:30 p.m.
And when you arrived, was anyone leaving?
Yes, there was a female party leaving as we came up to the door.
And do you understand what her relationship was to the family?
I do know, yes.
What is it?
She was the babysitter for the 3 juvenile children.
And after seeing this woman leave the residence, did you discover who else was in the residence at this time?
Yes.
Who?
Within the residence, we were able to meet with Brian Walshe, his mother, Ana Walshe, and there was 3 juvenile children inside as well.
Now, in that evening, did you have the opportunity to conduct an interview with anyone at the Walshe residence?
Yes, I did.
Who did you initially get the chance to speak with?
Initially, I spoke with Diana Walshe.
And Diana Walshe is Mr. Brian Walshe's mother, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Where was your conversation with Diana Walshe?
My conversation was in the living room area where the couches were situated. There's also a fireplace there. It is right off the kitchen area, separating the dining room area by a staircase set and a wall, I believe.
And was there anyone with you to help conduct this interview?
Yes, Detective Lieutenant Lopes of Cohasset PD was present with me.
Where were the other officers at this point in time that arrived with you?
The other officers were speaking with Brian Walshe in the dining room area portion of the home.
And was anyone else with Mr. Walshe besides those officers, as you know?
Just the 3 officers that arrived.
Where were the children when you initially had the opportunity to speak with Diana Walshe?
Upon her request, the children went upstairs in the main portion of the home to the 2nd floor.
Now, can you explain how the initial conversation, what occurred during your initial conversation with the defendant's mother?
Yes, as we sat down, Diana was asked to provide her date of birth and a phone number. She initially ignored my request and was texting on her phone. A follow-up request was also momentarily not addressed or not answered. She then advised us that she had utmost respect for what we do, but she only has 1 son, and she was very adamant in helping find Ana.
Did she say what she was doing as far as trying to find Ana?
Yes, she stated that she had Googled, researched a top PI firm, private investigation firm in the DC area, and she had been communicating with the owner / CEO of the company.
And did she give you any contact information for that person?
Yes, she provided both a business line and a private cell phone number for the individual.
Now, did she have the opportunity during this conversation, did she tell you what had occurred with her son's cell phone as far as January 1 and January 2nd?
Yes, during this conversation, she advised us that on January 2nd, Brian Walshe showed up at her home in Swampscott and advised her that his phone was missing and that he needed to use her device to communicate or try to reach Ana.
And did she show you anything from her phone during this part of the conversation?
Yes, she showed me her call logs as well as text message communications that were documented on her device.
And when you saw this, did you see the names of any, not asking the specific name, but did you see the names of anyone in the family?
Yes, there was a name associated with a juvenile child, the eldest, that was documented as a missed call.
And did you ask her about whose phone number that would be?
Yes, I did.
And what did she explain to you?
She indicated it was the 6-year-old's phone number as saved with the name in her device, and that she had purchased three of the juvenile children, cell phones, Apple AirTags, and iPads.
How long were you speaking with Diana Walshe before any of the children returned?
I would estimate it 15 minutes or so.
Which child did you wish to speak to?
The oldest 6-year-old child.
And was that one of the children that returned at this point in time?
Yes, it was.
And did you have the opportunity to speak to the oldest child?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain to us what occurred as far as that conversation?
Initially, when the child presented to our presence, myself and Detective Lieutenant Lopes, asked him if he was willing to have us ask him some questions. He shook his head in the affirmative without giving me a verbal response. Diana, at that point, asked him to sit on her lap while we held the conversation, and we proceeded to ask him some questions.
And what did the oldest child tell you about what he remembers as the last time he saw his mother, Ana Walshe?
What the child stated was that the last time he saw his mother was surrounded around the events of him hearing a noise, waking up, coming downstairs, and seeing her on the couch underneath his blanket, which he left in the room overnight. She was dressed in a set of pink pajamas with red hearts, and as he was walking by the kitchen island, he saw his iPad. He picked up the iPad, recognized that it was malfunctioning or broken, not working properly, and he requested that his mom, Ana, fix the iPad for him. Once she fixed the iPad, he indicated that Ana went upstairs and changed into her real clothes, returning back downstairs holding a brown duffel bag approximately 2 feet in length and a purse which he gestured to her wearing on her shoulder. He then stated that her taxi was here. He told her, "I love you." She responded, "I love you more." And she walked out the door to her ride. When asked if he saw the vehicle, saw the headlights for the vehicle, or saw her get into the vehicle, he stated he did not. Those are strictly his speculations. Obviously, he didn't use the word speculation, but...
And how did the conversation end with the oldest child?
I had a question for him asking, does he know where his mom... Before I was able to finish that question, Diana became animated with her arms, since he was sitting on her lap, flailing her arms in the air. I stopped abruptly, being interrupted by her gesture. She finished the question for me, stating cell phone. The child never answered my intended question, which was if he knew where his mom was, nor the question that Diana finished. He strictly said that mom wanted him to move to D.C. to be with her. He abruptly got up off of Diana's lap and ran into a different portion of the home.
And did you have any further conversation with the oldest child?
Yes, I did.
And what was that, sir?
At one point, a little bit later on, he returned to the area where myself and Detective Lopes was standing. He opened the door slightly, just wide enough to the basement that he could fit through. He took a step onto the first step going down into the basement, looked back at me, extended his arm, and I told him that he shouldn't go into the basement on his own, realizing there were child locks on the door. Then Diana also opened the door all the way and grabbed his hand and told him not to go down there.
Did any of the children ever give you anything that night?
Yes.
What did they give you?
The eldest 6-year-old boy gave me a little art piece that he rendered.
Now, how long were you in the home speaking to the oldest child and Diana Walshe?
I would estimate it to be 45 minutes, maybe more. It was a lengthy conversation in our presence in the home.
What did you do at the house after that?
I waited for the other officers to finish searching the home for the missing individual, to include the attic.
Why was the attic significant to you?
It had not been searched, and in my experience with other cases, we have had located individuals in crawl spaces and attics.
What types of cases are those, sir?
Death investigations.
And more specific, though, when you found people in crawl spaces like that, have they been as a result of murder or how so?
They were suicides.
What did you do as far as examining the outside of the home?
I proceeded outside, checked the yard, the property, to include trash cans, looking for Ana's phone. One of the locations that myself, Detective Lieutenant Lopes, Detective Schmidt, checked was Brian Walshe's Volvo SUV.
And did you ask anyone permission to check the Volvo?
Yes.
And who did you ask?
Brian Walshe.
And what did he say?
He complied, granted us permission, unlocked the vehicle, and we took a look through the contents of inside.
And what observations did you make of the Volvo?
I located a cell phone device inside the Volvo, located in the center console of the vehicle.
And did you have a conversation with Mr. Walshe about whose cell phone that was?
Yes, I asked him whose device that was, at which time he stated it was his oldest son's.
And did any of the police officers attempt to verify that?
Yes, Detective Lieutenant Lopes, having been provided with the phone number for that device, called the phone, and the phone rang, verifying that it is, in fact, the 6-year-old's phone.
And where did Detective Lopes get the phone number from?
Our conversation with Ana Walshe, when she showed us the call logs, the phone number was provided.
Do you remember what the phone number was for that device?
Not at the top of my head. Yes, 617-895-8028.
That phone, was it seized that night?
It was not, no.
Where was it left then?
In the vehicle.
Now, this is Thursday, January 5th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That night, besides looking in the Volvo, did you find anything else as far as cell phones that night?
No, I did not, no.
Okay. I'd like to ask you now some questions about January 6th, Friday.
Yes, sir.
Did you have the opportunity to contact anyone who was representing Mr. Brian Walshe?
Yes, I did.
Who was that you were contacting?
I contacted attorney Tracy Miner.
And why were you contacting Tracy Miner?
I wanted to communicate with her and get consent for the devices that belong to Brian Walshe and his juvenile children that were being utilized.
And what was your understanding of Tracy Miner's relationship to Mr. Walshe?
My understanding was that Tracy Miner was representing Brian Walshe on a criminal matter out of federal court in Boston.
And when did you start communicating with Attorney Miner?
I began communicating with her in the afternoon hours of January 6th. It was during the 3 o'clock hour, I believe.
And how were you communicating with her?
Via cell phone call communications.
Do you know roughly how many phone calls you had with Attorney Miner?
I had numerous communications. To the best of my estimate, probably three phone calls.
What did you ask Attorney Miner in the first conversation, if you remember?
In the first conversation, I identified myself and asked her to provide consent for Brian Walshe's phones. At that point, I had knowledge of at least 2 devices, the one that was missing, that was located on the second, and then the 6-year-old cell phone.
Okay, so to be clear, you say the one that was missing that was located in the second, who did you believe that cell phone belonged to?
Brian Walshe.
And the second device, what was that device that you were concerned about?
That was a device that contacted Diana with a missed call on the call log, and it was also now present inside Brian Walshe's vehicle in the SUV.
What did you say to Attorney Miner that you wished to do to these devices?
I stated that we wish to do a full system extraction, phone dump, more commonly used as known as a phone dump, of those devices for digital evidence data.
And what reservations did Attorney Miner express to you in the first conversation?
She stated she needed to talk to her client, and she would call me back.
And did you explain anything else you were looking for at this point in time?
No, I did not.
So how long did it take for Attorney Miner to contact you back?
It was somewhere between 5-10 minutes, maybe a little more, maybe 15 minutes, but I did receive a call from her within a short period of time.
And what happened in this next phone call?
She stated that it would be fine they would consent to the extractions. They just wanted it documented, and she requested a documentation to be generated.
Was there any limitations on what you were allowed to look at?
Yes, it was communicated verbally in our agreement that we were not to look at attorney-client communications prior to December 25th, 2022, and no communications between Ana and Brian Walshe prior to that date as well.
Besides those two issues, was there anything else that you were not allowed to look at when you spoke to Attorney Miner?
No.
During this conversation, was there mention of any other devices you wish to look at?
Yes, after we made the agreement for the two cell phones mentioned, I also requested that the iPad, which we knew was manipulated by Ana prior to her leaving the home, would also be included within the devices that were consented to.
Did you explain why you wanted to look at that iPad?
I did not know.
Why did you want to look at that iPad?
Well, if Ana manipulated the device and fixed it during the time frame that we were advised, there would be a digital footprint on the device documented that manipulation.
And to be specific, what iPad are you referring to that Ana manipulated?
It was the iPad that the 6-year-old saw on the island as he came downstairs after hearing a noise and waking up, and he picked it up and had his mom fix for him.
Why was that footprint significant to you in your investigation into the disappearance of Ana Walshe?
It would have really narrowed down the timeline of when left the home. It was in a short period of time after the device was manipulated that we were told Ana got dressed and left the home.
Had you had any access to that iPad before this conversation?
No.
And so when you were speaking to the oldest child, he never showed it to you?
No, he did not.
Okay. Now, besides the two areas that you had agreed upon with Attorney Miner, which was attorney-client contact and anything before December 25th with the defendant and his wife, she asked for what?
A documentation of the agreement that we verbally discussed and agreed upon.
And what did you do to document the agreement?
Communications were had with Norfolk District Attorney First Assistant Lynn Beelan, and she drafted an email including those specific restrictions of the full data extraction, digital evidence analysis in an email form and sent it to Attorney Miner and CC'd me on it as well.
What memory do you have of expressing these concerns to First Assistant Beeland at the time?
I do not have a memory of communicating with First Assistant Beeland.
So do you know how First Assistant Beeland knew to send the email?
I do not know.
What is the document I've just handed to you?
It's a copy of a printed out email exchange between Attorney Miner, which I'm CC'd on, and First Assistant Lynn Beelan and their communications.
And does that document, is that after you had had the conversations with Attorney Miner?
Yes, it is.
Could you read the first email into the record of that chain? First is, who is the sender?
The sender is Lynn Beeland.
Who are the recipients?
It is addressed to Tracy Miner, and I am CC'd on that email. The date is January 6th of 2023, and the time is 3:39 p.m.
And can you read the body of the email?
Yes, sir. Attorney Miner, as requested, the Norfolk District Attorney's Office agrees that in the investigation to Ana Walshe, any conversation between the attorney and client Brian Walshe is excluded from the search and examination of Brian Walshe's phone and the minor child's iPad. It is further agreed that any conversation between Brian Walshe and his wife, Ana Walshe, 1 week before she was missing, 12/25/22 and prior, shall be excluded from the search and examination of Brian Walshe's phone and the minor child's iPad. Should you have any questions, please contact me, Lynn Beelan, First Assistant District Attorney, Norfolk County, and the phone number.
And just for the record, when you say minor child, you are putting that in there opposed to reading the child's name?
Yes, sir.
Now, was there a response to that email that's in the chain?
Yes, there is.
Can you read the response, sir?
The response is, we consent to all communications on or after 12/25. If you want to go back further than that, I will have to get you a list of attorneys, as he has used a bunch of them.
And is there a subsequent response to that?
Yes, there is.
And can you read that into the record?
That date is fine, thank you.
And that was sent from whom?
That was sent from Lynn Beelan.
Did you receive any further email communication from First Assistant Beeland and Miner after that third entry into the email chain?
I have not, no.
Once that was done, those emails had been exchanged. What did you do as far as trying to get the devices?
I didn't do anything about trying to get the devices.
Why didn't you go get them?
I was tasked with traveling out of state, and I was not going to be present.
Where were you supposed to go as a result of traveling out of state?
I was traveling to Washington, D.C.
Why were you going to Washington, D.C.?
The information we had at the time and the multiple reports of Ana coming from D.C., living in D.C., and having traveled back to D.C. based on my conversation with Ana Walshe, I traveled to D.C. to go find Ana.
Did you meet up with anyone in law enforcement to help you in D.C.?
Yes, it was Detective Lieutenant Lopes and 2 troopers from another unit on the state police.
Now, so after the email exchange comes through, who do you inform that you've now received permission from Attorney Miner?
I informed Lieutenant Fanning.
And who is Lieutenant Fanning in the chain of command of the detectives unit?
He was the executive officer at the time in the unit.
And where were you when you informed Lieutenant Fanning?
I was in the command post.
And where was the command post located?
It was located a short distance down the street from 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway in a shopping plaza parking lot behind the stores.
Now, when you informed Lieutenant Fanning, were you talking to him in person, or was this over the phone, or what?
It was in person.
At the command post on the late afternoon of Friday, January 6th, how many state troopers were in and around this area at this point in time?
There were dozens and dozens.
And so, are you aware of who collected the devices from Brian Walshe on January 6th?
I am not aware, no.
So you didn't go to collect the devices?
No, I did not.
When did you return from Washington, D.C.?
It was during the late evening hours of January 8th, or Sunday, I believe, if I'm not mistaken on the date.
And did you have any further conversation with Attorney Miner about the devices after the phone calls and the emails?
No, I did not.
So after the email chain is done, do you have any further phone calls?
No.
And to be specific, with Attorney Miner?
No.
And going back to the second phone call, you told Attorney Miner that you wanted to look at the iPad?
Yes.
And can you just tell us what you told her about wanting to look at the iPad?
The conversation about the extractions, of full data extraction, was in reference to the 2 cell phones. We went into detail about that. Once she consented to those cell phones, I asked if we could also do the same with the iPad.
Was there any concerns about communications on the iPad?
No, there was not.
Did you explain to her whose iPad it was?
Yes, I did.
And when you explained to her, who did you tell was the user of the iPad?
I told her that based on my understanding, it was the 6-year-old juvenile.
Did you tell her anything further about the use of the iPad and why you were looking at it?
No, I did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, sir.
Under examination, you described your interaction with Diane Walshe.
Yes, sir.
And so you were involved in interviewing Diana Walshe along with the 6-year-old son.
Portions of it, yes.
When you say portions of it, what portions?
The 6-year-old was not present during the entire interview with Diana.
But you were present for the entire interview of Diana Walshe.
I was.
You didn't have any involvement in the interview of Mr. Walshe on January 5th?
No, not the official interview. I just introduced myself and met him. Brief communication verbally, not a formal interview.
Did you arrive at the home at the same time with the other officers who eventually did conduct an interview with Mr. Walshe on January 5th?
If I'm not mistaken, we all arrived together, yes, sir.
So you were sitting, is it fair to say that during these 2 different interviews, you were in different rooms?
Yes, we were separated. The 2 rooms are separated by the stairwell or staircase and a wall, I believe, in the home. That's right in the middle of the building. But there's open space for the front and the rear through the kitchen.
It's fair to say then that there were times during these interviews that you could hear people asking Mr. Walshe questions, correct?
To be accurate, because we were having our own conversation, I merely heard voices. I could not hear the specifics of their conversation or who was speaking.
And it's entirely accurate, isn't it, to say that the entire time that you talked to Diane Walshe, that Mr. Walshe, Mr. Brian Walshe, he was never present for any of that, correct?
With our conversation? No, he was not.
So when you were asked all these questions on direct examination, and you were describing the behaviors of Diane Walshe as you interpreted, it's fair to say that Mr. Walshe had nothing to do with any of those behaviors of Diane Walshe that you were upset with.
Are you asking if he was influencing her behavior?
Yeah.
I could not suggest that, no.
Okay. And, I mean, she is the grandmother of this the 6-year-old that you were also talking to.
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
And this 6-year-old was telling you, in his own words, what he remembered about seeing his mother, correct?
Yes, the information of his recollection was in his own words.
And when you were asked questions on direct examination about the iPad, fixing it, you used the word manipulation, right?
That is a term I use, yes.
Okay. You don't have any specific knowledge about what you characterized as the manipulation of the iPad.
The knowledge I have is that I was told she fixed the device for him. Diana said that the button was broken. Those types of manipulations of the device, in my training experience, would be logged within the database on the device.
But based on that information that you just told the court, when Diane Walshe mentioned a button, what button was it?
She didn't specify.
It's fair to say that you didn't make any effort to see if the button was now working or whatever button she was referring to was working, correct?
Correct, I did not see, no.
So you really don't know, do you, at the time, that the iPad was in fact not working, or if it just didn't come on? You really don't know. You're just going on the fact that Diane Walshe said something about a button wasn't working.
It was the child's information that he passed along to us and what Diana shared as well.
And the only question that you testified to, that you asked the 6-year-old, was something to the effect, do you know where your mother is, and you know where your mother went? That was when Diane Walshe interjected and made a comment, correct?
That specific question, she interrupted my full question, so I could not ask the full question. The question was interrupted.
Now, it's fair to say that you haven't been trained in interviewing young juvenile children, correct?
I don't have specific training for young juvenile children, but I am trained in interviews and interrogations.
Right, but you would agree that there are people that are trained specifically to interview young children, correct?
I am aware that there are specialists that conduct SANE interviews.
And you are aware of the fact that eventually on January 5th, there was an agreement to have the young child, the 6-year-old, interviewed by a trained specialist, correct?
I'm not certain of the date when the agreement happened, but I am aware that there was an agreement to do something like that along those lines.
And that would be done by someone in Norfolk, correct? In fact, I think the office that they use is in Norfolk, correct? Do you know that?
I am not aware of the location outside of Foxborough, but I could be wrong.
And you would agree, wouldn't you, that in your experience, it's not unusual, is it, for a parent or a grandparent to protect their child or grandchild from certain questions that they think may upset them?
No, I wouldn't say that it's unusual that a child or a parent or a grandparent would do something like that, no.
If I understand your direct examination and some of your questions, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you did or you did not have any conversation with Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beal regarding any supposed agreement?
I don't have a memory of talking to Lynn Beal on the phone about the agreement.
And it's fair to say that you've been asked by the Commonwealth in this case to search your records, your emails, whatever, for any such evidence communicating with Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beal regarding this agreement.
I have been asked, yes.
And you conducted that search and you found nothing.
Conversations over the phone. I don't have a conversation over the phone specifically in reference to the agreement.
So
but the email is produced. I'm CC'd on it.
Right, but you don't know about the content of any conversation between Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beal and Attorney Tracy Miner regarding that agreement.
I do not know, no.
And it's fair to say that you never attempted to contact Lynn Beal to make sure that you understood what the parameters were of any agreement, did you?
I did not contact Lynn Beal, and the email spoke for itself.
Well, you've testified here today that, for instance, you just answered a question on direct examination, that the iPad had no limitations put on, like the search of the iPhone, correct?
I rephrase the question.
Were there any limitations put on any search of the iPad?
The search limitations were included in the email, and it referenced all devices that we were going to get on consent.
Now, you've also told us that your discussions with Attorney Tracy Miner involved discussing and seizing cell phones, correct?
Yes, there were 2 cell phones, as I mentioned prior, and the iPad that we were aware of.
And regarding the 2 cell phones, we can all agree that one of them was purportedly Mr. Walsh's personal cell phone, and the other cell phone was the one in the Volvo that was attributed to the young 6-year-old, correct?
Yes, sir.
There is no reference in the email that you've referred to today to a second cell phone, is there?
I'd have to take a look at the email, but my understanding through our communications, myself and Tracy Miner, were for 2 cell phones and the 6-year-old's iPad.
Well, I understand that's your member. I'm asking you that with regards to the email that's been introduced into evidence, there's no reference to a second cell phone, is there?
Yes, based on my reviewing of that email content, there's no reference of a second phone.
And there's no reference to anything other than Brian Walsh's cell phone in that email.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again, please?
There's no reference to any other cell phone other than Brian Walsh's cell phone in that email agreement.
It talks about the 6-year-old's iPad.
Right, but there's no reference to a second cell phone or any other cell phone in that email agreement.
That is correct.
And in fact, there's certainly nothing about all of the minor children's cell phones.
That's correct.
There's reference in that email to one iPad, correct?
Yes.
And there's no reference to more than one iPad in that email, is there?
Just the 6-year-old's iPad.
Sergeant, it's fair to say that you wrote a report where you were discussing this agreement?
Yes, it is, yes.
And did you review that report before you testified here today on direct examination?
I did review it, yes.
And it's fair to say that in that report, you make reference to an agreement that encompassed, quote, his cell phones in regard to Brian Walsh. And you use those cell phones, plural, correct, in your report.
I believe that's right, if you're not mistaken.
You have that report with you?
I don't have it here with me, no.
And if you need to refresh your memory, just tell us. But you also, in that report, make specific reference to the agreement encompassed his minor children's, plural, cell phones, correct?
I'd have to take a look at the report, sir.
That's right. May I approach you on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I'd ask you, does that refresh your memory about what entered into your report that you drafted?
Yes, it does.
Does it refresh your memory that, in fact, you make reference to cell phones, plural, when it comes to Mr. Walsh's cell phone?
Yes, it does.
Does it refresh your memory the fact you made reference to all the children's cell phones?
Yes.
Does it refresh your memory that it referred to the children's iPad?
Yes.
Is it also fair to say that at the end of that report, you make specific reference that, quote, the agreement is attached to this report?
Yes, sir.
And the agreement we're talking about is what's already been introduced in evidence, correct?
That is correct, sir.
It's fair to say that that agreement that was introduced in evidence does not refer to multiple cell phones, multiple iPads, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And in fact, you said on direct examination that you had some conversation with Fanning, and Fanning then arranged to pick up the devices, correct?
That's correct.
Are you aware of the fact Fanning has written a report about what he went to pick up?
I am not aware now.
Did you talk with Fanning about what he had gone to pick up and what in fact he did pick up?
No, I never spoke to exactly what he picked up.
So you don't know that when Fanning went to Mr. Walsh's house to pick up the devices pursuant to the agreement, he only knew to pick up one cell phone and one iPad, correct? Or you don't?
I don't know what he actually picked up. I communicated 2 cell phones and an iPad.
And my question is, though, that you apparently don't know that based on the conversation he had with you at the command post, that he thought he was only supposed to pick up one cell phone and one iPad. You don't know that.
I never questioned Lieutenant Fanning on what he picked up.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
No objection, Your Honor.
22, marked and admitted as Exhibit 22.
Specifically, Sergeant, in that report that now is Exhibit 22, you specifically say the agreement was put into writing by Norfolk District Attorney's First Assistant Lynn Beelan, correct?
Yes, I do.
The agreement, you're referring to the email that's been introduced into evidence, correct?
That is correct.
There's nothing in the agreement that uses the phrase marital privilege.
No, sir.
There's nothing in your conversations that you put in your report that was to document this agreement. There's no reference to marital privilege, is there?
I'm sorry, there was two things you asked about. There was no mention of marital privilege outside of the statement about excluding communications between Ana and Brian Walshe.
And the phrase marital privilege does not appear in your report that's been introduced as Exhibit 22.
No.
And it doesn't appear in the, quote, agreement email that's been introduced today.
That statement does not appear now.
And the only thing that is referenced, the only subject matter that's referenced in the email agreement is, quote, communication.
That's the only subject matter that needed to be carved out of the full extraction.
That wasn't my question. My question was the only subject matter that is referenced in the agreement is communication.
Yes, sir.
Do you know, Sergeant, do you know when Mr. Walshe first talked to Tracy Miner, his attorney, about the request to search his phone?
I have no idea.
And do you know, Sergeant Bukhenik, when Tracy Miner, Attorney Tracy Miner, and Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beeler first began discussing the request to search Mr. Walsh's phone?
I would strictly be speculating when they first began. My only knowledge is to the email being sent from Lynn.
Have you talked to Assistant District Attorney, now retired, Lynn Beeler, regarding this agreement prior to this hearing?
I have no memory of talking to her about this agreement.
So the government, the Commonwealth, has not asked you to go talk to retired Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beeler and say, what did you and Attorney Tracy Miner agree to? You haven't been asked to do that.
No, sir.
Now, it's fair to say that there are consent to search forms used routinely by the Mass State Police, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those consent to search forms, they require information to be entered on their form that includes the person giving consent and the officer taking the consent, correct?
Yes, it is.
And they also include an area where you describe what is going to be searched, correct?
There's detailed explanation on the forms, yes.
And it's signed and dated by the person giving consent and a witness, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the reason for this is to make sure that people understand what consent was given, that it was given voluntarily, and what the parameters of any consent were, correct?
That is the purpose behind us reading those consent forms to the individuals we're getting the consent from.
And you didn't use one in this case?
No, sir.
And it's fair to say that you certainly had an opportunity to use one because you were at the home on January 5th of 2023 prior to any consent being given and any agreement being made, correct?
I was at the home at that point. I did not ask for consent on the 5th.
But, yeah, Guarino,
You may.
I'm going to show you a document, and it's not from this case. But is it fair to say that that is an accurate representation of the consent to search form that's used by the Mass State Police?
Although it does appear as a form that's generated by the state police, that's not the form we use, so I can't represent that this is what we would have used.
What is different? What is different from that form you're looking at now and the form that you say would be used by the Mass State?
Well, there's a lot of different characteristics of the form itself, just the way it appears, the way it's presented, the bottom portion as well. It's just slightly different.
Can I ask you then, Sergeant Bukhenik, is it fair to say that that form substance, whatever form you're referring to search for, would have included exactly what that form's asking for? Name of the person giving consent, a witness to sign on it, inform the person of their right to refuse consent, but also listing what and describing what is to be searched?
I would agree with you, yes.
With that caveat, I would move it.
Your Honor, I object. If the council wants, I'm happy to get a copy of their form if they generate.
Why don't we do that? That's the form that they actually might be using now as opposed to that form. There's no dispute with regard to the contents of the form. He didn't fight you on that. He agrees with you. It's in evidence. You don't need the form that he's not familiar with.
And I'll get a blank one and we'll stipulate to it as an exhibit.
That sounds...
I did ask for what
You didn't ask for... You asked for what previously?
I apologize to council. I have no memory of mass court. I will make sure that...
We can reach agreement on this, I'm sure.
With regards to There's nothing in the agreement email that has been produced as an exhibit that references anything about search histories, correct?
No, that specific term is not in the email.
And there's nothing in the email about location data, correct?
That's correct.
And once again, the only subject matter that's referenced in that email agreement is, quote, communication, correct?
Yes, as what to be excluded, yes.
Well, when you say what to be excluded, it's just, and, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but this will be my last question on this particular subject. The email agreement makes reference to what communications will be limited, and it makes specific reference to certain attorney-client conversations, communication, and communications between Mr. Walshe and Ana Walshe, correct?
That is what to be limited during the search and analysis of the device's data.
It certainly doesn't say, does it? Anywhere in that agreement that the agreement is that everything that's downloaded can be reviewed and analyzed, correct? Doesn't say that?
It does not specify that.
And it's important, isn't it? Just like that form that you were talking about a moment ago, it's important, isn't it, to be very specific in any written agreement as to what the terms of the agreement are, right?
It's important to understand what is being done. Our verbal communications mentioned phone extractions. That means all of the data on the phone. And what was to be limited based on our verbal communication, then subsequently put into email form, was the communications between client and attorney and Mr. and Mrs. Walshe.
But that's the way you're interpreting the content of this email that you did not write and did not respond to. That's fair, isn't it?
For the latter portion, yes, I did not write this email, nor did I respond to it. But the verbal agreement on the phone with Attorney Miner was that we were doing a full system data extraction on the devices provided that were consented to.
That's your member.
Yes, it is.
And your is that the agreement also included all of Mr. Walsh's cell phones, all of the children's cell phones, and all of the children's iPads.
No, my memory was that the devices I knew about was Mr. Walsh's cell phone that was missing, the children's cell phone that was in Mr. Walsh's vehicle, and the iPad referenced to by the 6-year-old, which was fixed by Ana. That's why the communication with Tracy Miner was about 2 cell phones with the iPad thrown in on top of those 2 devices.
Sergeant Bukhenik, just on that particular answer and question. The second sentence in your report that you wrote, that's dated January 6, 2023, you wrote specifically, during numerous phone conversations, we established a verbal agreement for the digital evidence extraction of devices belonging to and being used by Brian Walshe and his juvenile children to include Thomas Walshe, 6-year-old, Thomas Walshe's 6-year-old. Those include his cell phones and his minor children's cell phones and tablets, correct?
If that's verbatim from my report, that is what's written.
So my question that I asked you just a moment ago was, your memory of the agreement was it involved all of those devices, not just the 2 that we're talking about.
My conversation with Attorney Miner was for the 2 cell phones I knew existed and were referenced.
So why did you put all those other devices in your report that you wrote specifically about the agreement?
I don't understand.
Why did you refer to all of those devices in the one single report that you wrote and refer to it as the agreement? Why did you include all of the devices?
Because there was knowledge of other devices existing. So there was Diana's statement that she purchased cell phones for all the children.
Okay.
And iPads and AirTags, etc. So there were other electronic devices that could have come into play.
You would agree, wouldn't you, Sergeant Bukhenik, that there is some real ambiguity between what you stated as the content of the agreement in your report and that email that has been introduced in it?
I don't think it's ambiguous, no.
Were you present at the home, Mr. Walsh's home, on January 6th of 2023?
I don't remember going to the home. I might have been. I don't remember going to the home. I know I was at the command post. There was other missions I was conducting. I don't have a specific memory of being at the house. But if you have a specific question about maybe what transpired, I could give you an answer.
Do you know that there were numerous searches conducted to the house on January 6th?
I know that the CERT team and the dive team conducted searches around the home. I was not present for those searches. I was at a command post.
And you weren't there because you were in D.C. on January 7th.
That's correct. Early morning, January 7th, I left for D.C.
When did you leave for D.C. on January 7th?
Early morning hours. I don't know the exact time of the flight. Could have been 8, 9 a.m., but I never responded to Cohasset.
So you were not at the home on January 7th?
No, sir, I was not.
And you're not sure if you were at the home on January 6th?
I do not have a specific memory of being there. I might have. Yeah.
But we can all agree you were there on January 5th.
Yes, sir.
Were you there on January 8th?
No, I was not.
And did you negotiate, as you call it, the agreement? Did you negotiate the dates that are involved?
The person wants us to exclude would be excluded. Brian Walshe was eager to help us find Ana. The same sentiment was felt by me from Tracy Miner. She was trying to help while conducting her responsibilities as a defense attorney. So that was my understanding based on our conversation.
But was it your understanding that regardless of the communications that are referenced in there, attorney-client communications and communications between Mr. Walshe and Ana Walshe, that in fact there was a temporal limit placed on any search device?
Can you rephrase that question, please? The temporal limit, I just want to make sure I understand correctly.
That in fact there was a date, 12/25/2022, that the search parameter would begin, and there was an ending date of January 6, 2023, of the search parameter when the search would end. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of the date that we couldn't go back past, and that was the 25th. So we couldn't search for communications between client and attorney before the 25th, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Walsh's communications.
And I guess what I heard you say was that it wasn't you that suggested 12/25, correct?
Right. I wouldn't have a reason to pick a date. That date, other than being Christmas, had no significance to me.
And it wasn't you who picked the date of January 6th, 2023.
I believe it was present. So the term used was present.
On direct examination, you used the word documentation in the context of what Attorney Tracy Miner asked for. You remember that?
Yes.
And was it documentation regarding what the agreement was?
She just wanted to put in writing, so we needed to document what the specifics were.
And was it also documentation about what, in fact, searches were conducted and how they were conducted?
No, we didn't discuss the details of the searches. She just wanted specific things excluded from the analysis and the searching of the data from those devices. And that is what was documented by First Assistant Limbulan, and she agreed to it.
That's all I have.
Read around.
Thank you, Sergeant. What memory do you have Attorney Miner mentioning mayoral privilege in your conversation?
No memory whatsoever.
The scene that was mentioned, where does the district attorney's office and the state police do those forensic?
To the best of my knowledge, at the NAC in Foxborough, if I'm not mistaken.
And do you have any certifications in cell phone analysis?
I do.
And what certifications do you have?
I have a Celebrite basic course. It's a week-long course with certification.
So when you say the term digital evidence extraction, what significance does that have as far as Celebrite?
It's a full file system download, basically a copy of what the device contains for data and information on it that's then transferred onto a processing computer with an exact copy. Then Celebrite parses out certain information that's either labeled or carved out if it has been deleted and no longer assigned a value that is of significance.
Did Attorney Miner request a consent?
No, she did not.
No.
Recross. The witness may step down.
Thank you.
Solemnly swear affirm the testimony shall provide the matter now inherent to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant John Fanning, Fanning.
And Lieutenant, where do you work?
I work for the Massachusetts State Police assigned to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office.
How long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police?
20 years next month.
And how long have you been assigned to the District Attorney's Office?
13 years.
And how long have you been a lieutenant?
Since December of 21.
Lieutenant, I'd like to ask you some questions concerning January 6th, 2023. That day, what was your involvement into the investigation into the disappearance of Ana Walshe?
I had responded to the command post in Cohasset behind the Stop and Shop off of Route 3A.
And at some point that day, did you leave to retrieve any digital devices?
I did.
Where were you going to get those devices?
At the Walsh resident at 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway.
And how did you know that you were able to go to that location to get those devices?
I initially had spoke to Sergeant Bukhenik, and then I spoke with Attorney Tracy Miner.
When did you speak to Attorney Miner, if you remember?
It would have been just before I left to go there. I'd say sometime in the 4 p.m. hour.
And how did you contact Attorney Miner?
By phone.
And can you tell us about the conversation you had with Attorney Miner?
Yes. I introduced myself. I hadn't met her previously, so made a brief introduction. Told her that I had spoken to Sergeant Bukhenik, that he was out of pocket because he was preparing for a trip to Washington, D.C., and that I'd be handling communications while he was gone. It was a cordial conversation. She was very cooperative. I explained that she had had a previous conversation with Sergeant Bukhenik and a email communication with First Assistant Len Beeland. I said, I'd like to go get those devices as soon as possible. She agreed. She said that Brian was home and that I could head over there. We also had a brief discussion about why the timeline of the Walsh oldest child, that he had stated that Ana had touched the device and fixed it for him. That was really important to us because we were trying to hone in on some surveillance.
And so what did you tell Attorney Miner about that device? Is that what you said to her?
Yes, we had a conversation about the importance of narrowing down our search timeline for vehicles potentially coming to and from that residence.
Now, why did you want to go get those right now, as you just said?
Well, we were trying to find Ana Walshe. It was important that we got those devices. It was my understanding from other investigators that Ana used different devices. That was according to Brian, that Ana had utilized multiple devices. Brian had stated to investigators in previous interviews that Ana would use his phone from time to time. She had used it for Uber and Lyft. And then, obviously, the oldest Walsh's device was important because of this account from the oldest Walsh about Ana fixing his iPad prior to her leaving.
So, you have this conversation with Attorney Miner. About how long do you think the conversation was?
5 or so minutes.
And after the conversation, where did you go?
I went to the Walsh residence.
When you arrived at the Walsh residence, who was there?
Brian Walshe.
Was anyone else home at the time?
No, not that I remember. I didn't see anyone else.
Can you just tell us what's your interaction with Mr. Walsh when you got there?
Yes, I pulled in, went up to the front door, knocked. I was encountered by Mr. Walsh. I introduced myself. I had not met him previously. He invited me in. I stepped off to the left, which would have been in the kitchen area, dining area, just to my immediate left. I said, I just spoke with Attorney Miner. Did you know that I was coming? He said, yes. I said, I'm here to retrieve these devices.
And what was his demeanor like when you were speaking with him that night on January 6th?
Very cooperative, cordial, helpful.
And so you said that you were there. What devices did you think you were going there to retrieve?
His cell phone and his son's iPad mini.
And so you told him that did you tell him what devices you were looking for when you arrived?
Yes.
And so what happened after you told him about the devices you were looking for?
He went off to my left, past the kitchen, into kind of a living room area. There's also a desk in that area. And very quickly came back with the iPad mini that he said was his oldest son's.
And he produced anything else besides the iPad mini at this point in time?
He gave me his cell phone.
And after you got those two devices, what happens?
He then said that he wanted to go find another device that his kids access. I said, okay. He thought it would be helpful. At that time, he went to my right, which was into kind of an open, I don't know what I've described, open room where the dog cage kennel was, and there was a flight of steps that went up to another room. He went out of view that way, and shortly thereafter returned with another iPad with a cracked screen.
And did he say anything when he gave you the second iPad?
He just said, my kids use this. It might be helpful to you.
What did you say after he gave you the second iPad?
We had just confirmed the passwords. He had told me the password to his cell phone, and he confirmed the passwords on the two other devices as the kids predominantly use those, and I wrote them down.
And so after you received the passports, what happened as far as your conversation with Mr. Walsh?
I told him we're going to try to return them as soon as possible. I appreciate him cooperating, and I left the residence.
And so once you left the residence, where did you immediately go to?
My vehicle.
And when you got into your vehicle, what did you do with any of the devices?
I put the 2 iPads on my passenger seat. I had Brian Walsh's phone in my hand. I checked the password that he gave me to unlock it. It would be normal for me in most situations to put the device into airplane mode to preserve data. In this case, I don't recall putting it into airplane mode because if Anna had tried to reach out, the device wouldn't work. I also went into the text app just to see the last communication with Ana Walshe, the time, which really is just like a timestamp. It could say today, yesterday, or it would go back in time with dates. Then I relocked the phone knowing that I had the correct password and put it back on top of the 2 iPads.
And once you did that, where did you go?
I went back to the command post.
And so when you got to the command post, Lieutenant, what did you do as far as handling who did you give these devices to?
Trooper Connor Keefe.
Why'd you give them to Trooper Connor Keefe?
Trooper Keefe is one of our forensics examiners. So he was there waiting, and I was arranging for him to take them back to our Canton office for download.
Do you have an idea of when you gave these to Trooper Keefe?
It was immediately following coming back from the Walsh residence.
And so, did you give Trooper Keefe any commands at this point in time as far as what to do with these devices?
I gave him the 3 devices, kind of stacked up on top of one another, with a piece of paper with the passwords, and I told him, you have consent to download the data and analyze the data of the phone from December 25th until the present.
And did you give him anything else besides those 3 devices and the piece of paper with the passwords?
No.
And on January 6th, did you have any further conversations with Attorney Miner?
I do not recall any conversations there on the 6th.
So, do you know when those devices were returned to Mr. Walsh?
The afternoon, approximately 1:30 on January 7th.
Now, later that afternoon, were any of the troopers assigned to your detective unit dispatched to the area of Swampscott?
We're talking January 7th.
January 7th, yes.
Yes, they were.
Okay. And to be clear, we're talking about Saturday, January 7th. Who was dispatched to that area of Swampscott?
At approximately 4 p.m., I dispatched Trooper Kukowski, Sergeant Panazelis, Trooper Gobranson, and Trooper Sullivan.
Where did you send Trooper Kukowski?
CVS in Swampscott.
Why did you send him to CVS in Swampscott?
Because Brian Walshe had told Trooper DeChico and Detective Schmidt that he had went there when he visited his mother.
And where did you send the other 3 troopers, Gobranson, Sullivan, and Pantazelis?
Whole Foods in Swampscott.
Why did you send them to Whole Foods in Swampscott?
Because the defendant said that he had went there when he went up to his mother's residence.
And so why are you sending troopers to these locations that the defendant said he was at?
To confirm if he went there.
And so that was done, those troopers were dispatched on Saturday, January 7th at approximately what time?
Between 4 and 5 p.m.
And that time frame, when was it that you heard back from Trooper Kukowski about the CVS in Swampscott?
I'd say somewhere in the 6 to 7 p.m. range. I can't recall the exact time.
And what was it Trooper Kukowski able to confirm as far as the defendant entering the CVS in Swampscott?
He was not there.
And was Trooper Kukowski dispatched to another CVS at this point in time?
Yes.
Which one?
I don't recall exactly. That wasn't at my direction. That was something he did on his own, which would be normal for our investigators.
And did you receive knowledge from Trooper Kukowski if he had discovered the defendant on video of another CVS to confirm his timeline?
Yes, and he did not see Brian Walshe at the other CVS.
Now, going to Whole Foods, who was sent to Whole Foods?
Sergeant Panazelis and Troopers Sullivan and Gobranson.
And what were they able to discover as far as confirming the defendant's location at Whole Foods as he relayed to Trooper DeChico?
He did not go there either.
And about what time were they at Whole Foods to discover this?
Somewhere after 5 p.m. on the 7th.
Now, when were you ever notified about the contents of the devices that were given to Trooper Keefe on the 6th?
Around 6 p.m. on the 7th.
And who notified you as far as the contents of any of the devices?
Trooper Nick Guarino.
And who is Trooper Guarino in your detectives unit?
He's also a forensics examiner.
And how did he notify you?
He called me.
And what did he say when he called you?
He said, I found something in the search history, and that's interesting. I said, well, what was it? And it was numerous searches about dismembering a body, how to embalm a body, how to get rid of a body, numerous searches related to that, another search related to divorce.
And so after he said he notified you of that, did he communicate to you and other troopers what he had found?
Yes.
How so?
He sent an email.
And as far as analyzing the iPad mini, what was your understanding as further analyzation of the iPad mini at this point in time?
We were going to stop.
And what was going to be done as far as the iPad mini after stopping? This is the data we're talking about.
Yes, we had stopped, and we were going to obtain a search warrant to seize that device.
So to seize that device. Now, where did you believe the device was located on the evening of January 7th?
It was back at the home.
And so what was done as far as trying to obtain a search warrant for the home?
We started writing one on the evening of January 7th.
And was one obtained?
Yes.
When was that search warrant executed?
Between 8 and 9 a.m. on January 8th.
Now, were you there when it was executed?
I was.
So when the search warrant was executed, who was home at the Walshe residence?
Brian Walshe, his mother Diane, the 3 children, and their dog.
And after the search warrant was initially served, did you have any further conversations with Attorney Miner?
I did. Once we secured the scene, I called Attorney Miner and notified her that we were executing a search warrant at the Walshe residence. She told me that she was headed there, and she'd be there shortly.
And how long after that did it take for her to arrive?
I'd say 15 minutes or so.
And once she arrived, what happened did you have any further contact with Attorney Miner?
We spoke in the driveway. I handed her a copy of the search warrant, and I told her, we're searching the residence. Do you have a place for the Walshe family to go? Which she replied she did, and we arranged for her and the Walshes to leave to go to Attorney Miner's house in Scituate.
Now, after that interaction with Attorney Miner, did you have any further interaction on Sunday, January 8th with Attorney Miner?
I did.
When was that?
When we went to arrest Brian Walshe.
And where was that?
At her residence.
And what was the contact you had with Attorney Miner at this point in time?
She met us right out front. She actually came out before we got to the door, and I asked where Brian was. She said in the house. I said, we need to go talk to Brian right now. And she said, well, he's not going to say anything. I said, that's fine, but we need to find him right away. We walked right in. The dining room was right off to the left. Brian Walshe was standing there, and we placed him under arrest.
Now, Lieutenant, understanding you had the opportunity to have your communications with Trooper Guarino on the evening of Saturday, January 7th, had you not had the conversations for Trooper Guarino on Saturday, January 7th, what would the State Police Detective Unit have been doing to obtain a search warrant for the residence of Mr. Walshe that evening?
Had I not had that conversation with Trooper Guarino?
Yes.
At that point, the information came all at the same time, I would say, but the issue that we were having is regardless of the search history, we were still misled by Brian Walshe. In the information that he gave us, we spent time and resources going up to confirm his information. I think had we not known that information of the searches, we still would have written a search warrant for the house, less physiological fluid and instruments of the crime.
What information did you have as far as ransom emails at this point in time?
We had received an email, it was on the morning of the 7th, meaning we, Cohasset Police, from a Richard Walker requesting a ransom, and that stating basically that he had Ana Walshe and was requesting a certain amount of money for her to be returned.
And where was the last place Ana Walshe had been seen prior to her disappearance, to your knowledge, on the evening of January 7th?
Inside the home on January 1st.
Your Honor, may I have a moment?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Lieutenant, have you reviewed the transcripts of the interviews of Mr. Walshe conducted by Cohasset Police and Massachusetts State Police on January 4th, January 5th, January 7th?
I would say I've, not directly the transcripts, but I have some understanding of them, sir.
So when you testified here just moments ago that Mr. Walshe, Brian Walshe, told one or more of those people that Ana Walshe had used his phone to contact Lyft or Uber. You remember saying that?
Yes. Yes.
Where is that? Where is that in the interview that I just described?
I do believe I read it. I could be wrong for sure, but I do believe I read it, but I feel like that at least some type of communication was given to me at that time.
Well, was it a but you're not suggesting it was a communication given to you by Mr. Brian Walshe. You're saying a communication by one of your colleagues or somebody. You're not
Correct.
Sure.
And it could have been one of the child's devices. I'm not sure how he testified previously, if I specifically just said Brian's phone, but that is what I remember.
And when you testify that based on your conclusion or opinion that Mr. Walshe had misled people with regards to where he was, you're relying on what another trooper reported to you based on his review of what?
Video surveillance and also items that he stated he purchased they had asked about.
And have you looked at those, whatever you're referring to, the videos, say CVS and Whole Foods?
No.
And did you, before you relied on that information, did you talk to anybody at CVS or Whole Foods to discuss how their cameras are situated, what they view, what they don't view? Did you conduct anything like that?
Not personally, no.
And you are aware of the fact, aren't you, Lieutenant, that when Mr. Walshe was being asked questions about where he went and where he had been on certain days, that he was being asked those questions at his home and there was distractions going on during those interviews. You're aware of that, correct?
I'm not I wasn't there.
Okay. Are you aware of the fact that on the recordings you can hear a dog barking repeatedly?
I didn't hear the recordings, but that would make sense.
And are you aware of the fact that Mr. Walshe specifically told the troopers when he was being... I'm sorry, strike that. Are you aware of the fact that when he was being asked questions on January 4th, he was actually talking and telling them that he was tired and hadn't had sleep and words to that effect?
No.
And in your experience as a state trooper investigating crimes, it's fair to say, isn't it, that when someone is being asked questions about a missing spouse, let's say, the mother of their children, they can be under some stress, correct?
Absolutely.
Now, you also told us that you were the one that went out and retrieved devices on January 6th of 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
And back in January 6th of 2023, you didn't write in the report about that, did you?
I did not.
And then you told us on direct examination today that you remember having a conversation with Attorney Tracy Miner on January 6th, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't write a report about that.
Correct.
And what you've done in the last week or so is you've written reports regarding those interactions, correct?
Yes, sir.
And one of the reports that you just wrote a couple of weeks ago, if not a week ago, you dated that the report date is January 6th of 2023, correct?
Yes, when it happened?
No. The title of your report is Interview 2023-112-4-116, Report Date 01/06/2023.
Correct.
When you enter those dates on the Massachusetts State Police report in that particular space, that is supposed to indicate the date of the report.
It is. I think it's a bit confusing. Sometimes it's the date I'm writing the report. Sometimes it's a newer system that we just had switched over to in the last few years. Sometimes it's the day I write it. Sometimes it's the date of the actual report.
Well, in fact...
But I usually reflect it in my first sentence, the actual time of the event.
Well, in fact, like I just said, you've written no less than 3 reports in the last week reciting what you just...
Yes.
And in 2 of the reports, you put report date. May 7th, 2025, right?
Right.
And in the other report, you put the date of May 15th, 2025.
Correct.
So whether the system changed over the years, the fact is the system has been the same since you started drafting these reports years later about what you recall happened and didn't happen back on January 6th, correct?
Yes.
And one of the things you just told us that when you went to the house on January 6th, that at some point Mr. Walshe then went up and got another iPad, a second iPad, correct?
Yes.
And he told us today on direct examination that he said something to the effect of, my son uses this, maybe it'll be helpful, correct?
Yes.
In the report that you just wrote in the last week or so, you didn't include anything of such a statement, did you?
I'm not sure.
That's the report where you talk about going to the house and Mr. Walshe retrieving a second iPad, correct?
Yes.
And nowhere in that report does it say anything about him telling you, my son used this, or words to that effect, that maybe it'll be helpful.
Correct.
And it is fair to say, isn't it, that when you went over to the house to pick up the devices, you had been told that you were to pick up 2 devices, correct?
Yes.
One cell phone and one iPad.
Yes.
And that was pursuant to the agreement that was reached between Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beelan and Attorney Tracy Miner, correct?
About 2 devices?
Yes.
I was told to get 2 devices. I'm not sure if the agreement, as I had read it, specifically stated 2 devices.
When you say that agreement, what are you referring to specifically? A written?
The email between Attorney Miner and Attorney Beeland.
So as you sit here today, you don't even have a recollection of whether that email that's referred to as the agreement only references Brian Walshe's cell phone and the iPad belonging to the 6-year-old.
Correct. As I remember it, we talked about what data was going to be extracted and what time frame.
No, but I'm asking you specifically about the devices you had been told to go pick up. You were told to go pick up 1 cell phone and 1 iPad.
That was my communication, yes.
And you got that communication from Sergeant Bukhenik.
Sergeant Bukhenik, yes, sir.
You didn't talk to Assistant District Attorney Lynn Beelan regarding the agreement and what you were to pick up.
I do not recall specifically, but she was at the command post that night. I just don't recall a specific conversation with her about it.
And when you talked to Attorney Tracy Miner on January 6th, before you retrieved the items, you didn't talk to her about picking up extra items or anything in the store. You just were talking about 1 cell phone and 1 iPad.
Correct.
And it's fair to say, isn't it, that the state of the knowledge of the investigation that you possess on January 7th of 2023, you had no information whatsoever that the iPad that was purportedly belonging to the 6-year-old had been used in any way to go from one location to another or anything like that, correct?
Just give me a second. I'm trying to process the question here. On January 7th, can you ask it again, sir? I'm sorry.
Restate the question, because I'm not following it. If I can't follow it,
sorry about that.
It's having evidentiary value to me. So why don't we just try that again?
My question, is it based on what you had learned thus far up to January 7th? You had no knowledge that the iPad that you went to pick up on January 6th had been in fact used by Ana Walshe.
Are we talking about the iPad mini or the cracked iPad?
The iPad mini?
Well, we did have information from the oldest Walshe that she had manipulated that device.
Right, but you didn't have any other information other than, quote, the manipulation of the device.
At what time are we talking? In the morning of January 7th, previous to Trooper Guarino calling me?
Let's start there. Yes.
No, I did not. No.
And you certainly didn't have any reason to believe that an iPad belonging to a 6-year-old would contain so-called location data or search history or anything like that.
Location data, yes, it could include location data. There was no thought in my mind about search history at that time.
And you say it could have had location data in it, but you didn't have any specific information about any specific location data that might be in a 6-year-old child's iPad, did you?
No.
And you didn't have any information conveyed to you by anyone about another iPad described as a cracked iPad that you retrieved on January 6th also, correct?
Correct.
In fact, when you went there, you weren't even expecting to pick up an iPad, a second iPad.
Correct.
And it's fair to say, isn't it, that the Mass State Police utilizes body cams when they conduct searches, correct?
Yes.
You did so in this case, didn't you?
Correct. We use them until we secure the home, and then we usually deactivate them.
And were you wearing a body cam on January 6th when you went to the house to pick up the items?
No.
And you are familiar with Massachusetts State Police consent to search forms, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't use one or try to use one or attempt to fill one out before you took the items, the devices, for Mr. Walshe that day on January 6th, did you?
No, we were working together cooperatively to find Ana Walshe, and I was happy that we were working together.
No, but I understand your answer, but you didn't use a consent to search.
There was already an agreement, so I think it wouldn't have made sense after just talking to Attorney Miner, talking to Sergeant Bukhenik, an agreement in writing to then show up with a consent form. I think Attorney Miner would have had a problem with that.
Well, you think that, but my question is simple. You used those consent to search forms. You did not use one in this case.
That's correct.
And those consent to search forms, without belaboring the point, they're used to make sure that what you do, when it's looked at later on, that there's evidence that there was, in fact, a voluntary consent, and that whatever parameters of any search that was going to be conducted would be followed that the person giving consent understood that.
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you, Judge.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant, you were asked a question about one of your police reports concerning whether or not you had mentioned that the son might have used the iPad in the police report.
Yes.
Do you have a memory of that paragraph where you mentioned that you were asked about as far as the son using the iPad?
Guys are confusing me. I'm sorry. Do I have
We're right there with you.
Do I have a memory of the paragraph? Is the one I just read?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what you mentioned as far as the son using the iPad in that report? Would the report help you out?
Yes.
Specifically, the second sentence.
Got it.
All right. Lieutenant, did you write in the report whether or not the son used the iPad?
I did.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any witness may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall provide in the matter now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, and in the pains and penalties. Please have a seat and just make sure.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Connor Keefe, Keefe.
Sir, where do you work?
I work for the Massachusetts State Police.
And how long have you been with Massachusetts State Police?
Almost 8 years.
What is your current rank?
Trooper.
Within the state police, do you work for a certain unit?
Yes.
What unit?
Currently assigned to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office.
And do you have any special responsibilities within that unit?
Yes.
What are those?
Digital forensic examiner and cell phone record analyst.
And have you received any training concerning the examination of cell phone or digital devices?
Yes.
Can you tell us kind of briefly what that training has been?
Sure. I have numerous trainings from Cellbrite, which is a cell phone forensics company. Also through Burla, which is a motor vehicle forensics company. I have online and hands-on training through Magnet. And I have cell phone record analysis training from LexisNexis and the FBI CAS team.
Are you familiar with a company called Keefe?
Yes.
And have you received any trainings from them?
Yes.
All of these trainings that you mentioned, do they carry certifications?
Yes.
What does it take to get the certifications?
Majority of the time it's an in-person 40-hour training.
And so, in addition, have you had to take tests in these different disciplines as far as Celebrate and Keefe?
Yes.
Did you pass those tests?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions as far as your involvement in the disappearance of Ana Walshe.
Yes.
When did you first become involved?
January 5th, 2023.
And how did you become involved?
I was requested by my supervisors to assist with analyzing exigent cell phone records from Verizon.
I'm sorry, exigent cell phone records?
Correct.
Okay. And whose number did you believe you were examining?
I believe the number was associated with Ana Walshe.
And when was the last time that number connected with the network?
It was January 2nd, 3:14 a.m.
And do you know where that number connected with the network as far as the tower?
It was in the area of 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Cohasset, Massachusetts.
When were you doing this on January 5th?
Late in the evening.
And so now I want to ask you about January 6th. On January 6th, Friday, when did you arrive in Cohasset, if you remember?
Around 8:30 p.m.
And where were you stationed in Cohasset that day?
During the day, sir?
Yes, sir.
At the CP?
In the CP, that's the command post?
Correct.
All right. Now, did anyone ever give you any digital devices that day?
Yes.
Who gave you digital devices?
Lieutenant John Fanning.
What did he give you as far as devices?
He gave me 3 mobile devices.
And you say 3 mobile devices. Can you describe them? Can you tell us what they were?
Yes. One was an iPhone 13 mini, one was an iPad 6 mini, and one was an iPad 6.
And about what time do you think you got these devices from Lieutenant Fanning?
Sometime after 8:30 p.m.
And where did you go once you got these devices?
I went to the digital forensics lab at the Norfolk District Attorney's Office in Canton, Massachusetts.
And so you went from Cohasset to Canton at this point in time?
Correct.
And so we're talking about Friday night, January 6th.
Yes.
When you got to the lab, was there anyone else there from your unit to help you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Trooper Nicholas Guarino.
So what was your understanding of what you were allowed to do with these 3 devices?
I was told that Brian Walshe and his attorney, Tracy Miner, provided consent to extract and analyze these 3 devices from December 25th, 2022 through January 6th, 2023.
And so how did you begin to do that extraction on these devices?
The first device I extracted was the iPhone 13 mini.
Okay. And so walk me through that. What did you do to extract data from the iPhone 13 mini?
Sure. So in the digital forensics lab, we used Keefe, which is a forensic machine. We use specialized forensics hardware and software. You will have these Keefe software program running on a forensic computer. You will plug the device into the gray key hardware machine, and then the extraction process will begin.
And why didn't you just do all three at once?
We are limited to one gray key forensic machine in the lab.
And how long does it take for gray key to get the data from the device?
Could be hours.
That night, do you know when you began the extraction from the iPhone 13 mini?
Approximately 9:30 p.m.
And do you know when that extraction was completed?
I believe 12:28 a.m. on January 7th.
Okay, so that took approximately 3 hours-ish?
Yes, sir.
After that data was extracted from that device, the iPhone 13 mini, what did you do next?
The next device I performed the forensic extraction on was the iPad 6 mini.
The iPad 6 mini. And did you wait until that was completed?
No.
What did you do?
I went home.
Okay. When was the data finally extracted from that device, if you remember?
I recall about 1:30 a.m.
Okay.
On the 7th.
And you weren't there when it was completed?
No, sir.
When did you return back to the digital forensics lab in Canton to continue your work?
Approximately 10:30 a.m. on the 7th.
Was Trooper Guarino with you at this point in time?
No, he was not.
What did you do next?
Next, I conducted the extraction on the iPad 6.
And when did you begin that?
About 10:50 a.m.
And when was that extraction completed?
Just before 11:30 a.m.
Now, once the data has been extracted from the three devices, what do you do with the data?
All the data has to be, so once the data is extracted, it is placed on the forensic server from the Gray Key software.
So how long does it take to get from the Gray Key software into the server?
Again, it could take hours depending on how large the extraction is, how much data there is.
And is this one at a time, or can you do all three at once?
We tend to do one at a time.
When did Trooper Guarino arrive on January 7th, that Saturday?
About 3 p.m.
And so, did you have any difficulties getting the data from Gray Key into the server?
No.
All right, so the data's in the server. Now what do you do with the data?
In order to read the data, we use a program called Cellbrite Physical Analyzer.
And so, how long does it take to get the data from the server to be read by the Cellbrite program?
Again, it could take hours.
And so that day, when were you finally able to start looking at data from any of the devices?
Approximately 5 p.m. on January 7th.
When Gray Key completes extracting data from a device, what is created from Gray Key as far as a report?
There is a Gray Key progress report.
And did Gray Key create progress reports for these devices?
Yes.
And have you reviewed those progress reports prior to today?
Yes.
And do they accurate to your understanding of how Gray Key works and what the device did as far as pulling the data?
Yes.
What device did you have the opportunity to review? What data from what device did you have the opportunity to review?
The iPhone 13 mini.
Where were you reviewing this data from the iPhone 13 mini at the office in Canton?
I was on the first floor in the forensic lab.
Where was Trooper Guarino at this point in time?
He was on the second floor in the main office area.
And did one of you start before the other, or was it around the same time?
It was around the same time.
What device's data was he reviewing that night?
The iPad 6 mini.
Now, what did you notice when reviewing the iPhone 13 mini as far as the device being unlocked between January 1st and 2nd?
I noticed there were 4 unlocks between that time frame.
So when you're looking at the Cellbrite program, can you just describe for us what does the Cellbrite reader look like when you're looking at it?
So Cellbrite Physical Analyzer, it's interactive, so it parses the data into a readable format. It can parses it out into calls, contacts, messages, web history, locations, stuff of that nature.
And so what part of the Cellbrite program were you looking at as far as analyzing the data?
I went to the timeline view.
All right, what's the timeline view show you?
Timeline view gives you the ability, it shows you all device activity from the whole device.
And so what did you do as far as confining the amount, the time in the timeline that you were looking at?
I condensed the timeline down to January 25th, 2022 to January 6th, 2023.
And so
January 26th? January 6th.
January 6th, December 25th, 2022 to January 6th, 2023.
Got it.
Yes, Your Honor.
And so why didn't you go to December 24th of 2022?
That was outside the consent agreement.
And so when you're looking at this timeline and function, and you confine it to that area, what access do you have to data before the 25th? of December?
None.
So again, you're looking at the timeline feature. And why do you choose to look at the timeline feature?
Because that will narrow down or condense the amount of data in which I am looking at.
Now, while you were looking at the timeline for the iPhone 13 mini that night, did anyone interrupt you?
Yes.
Who?
Trooper David Chico.
And what did Trooper DeChico ask of you?
Trooper DeChico informed me that he conducted an interview earlier in the day on January 7th, and Brian Walshe stated that on January 2nd, the only place he went to was Press Juice Bar in Norwell, Massachusetts.
And so, after hearing that from Trooper DeChico, was there anything, did he ask you to do anything?
He asked me to confirm or corroborate if there was any location data associated with that.
So, this is on January 7th. You're looking at the timeline data and you're talking to Trooper DeChico.
Yes.
And what do you discover as far as location data on January 7th?
So, prior to that, after Trooper DeChico told me, through the timeline application within Cellbrite, I filtered out all data but native location data within January 1st to January 6th.
Okay.
And from then, I started my analysis for January 2nd.
What is native location data in cell phone analysis?
Native location data is embedded in the Apple iOS operating system. It can come from a number of different things: Bluetooth, satellites, Jeep's Wi-Fi, a number of different things.
And how is the device doing that?
The device constantly communicates with different technologies.
Now, you've confined the location data, the native location data, from January 1 to January 6, and you're looking at what time frame now?
The whole time. The whole time frame.
And did you have any further conversation with Trooper DeChico about what you're seeing on January 2nd?
Yes.
What did you say?
Approximately 4:15 p.m., January 2nd, 2023, the device is in the area of Home Depot in Rockland, Massachusetts.
Now, do you talk any further with Trooper DeChico at this point in the evening?
Not that I recall.
Did you have any conversations after that with Trooper Guarino?
Yes.
And when was it that Trooper Guarino talked to you that night?
Approximately 6:30 p.m.
And what was it that Trooper Guarino approached you about?
He had found some concerning searches on the device that he was analyzing.
And he was looking at the iPad Mini 6?
Correct.
The one without the crack screen?
Yes.
Okay. And what was it that he did? Now, he tells you this. Do you do anything to look at the data that he's talking to you about?
No.
Okay. So what did he tell you about?
He told me there was a number of concerning searches that occurred on the iPad.
So what was done as far as any further searching of the iPad 6 Mini?
To my knowledge, Trooper Guarino, he had stopped his analysis and informed the supervisors.
Now, with what you were looking at, which was the iPhone 13, did you stop your analysis as far as the work you were doing on the iPhone 13?
No.
So on the iPhone 13, did you have the opportunity to do any further analysis as far as native location data on that device?
Yes.
When did you do that?
January 8th.
And what were you analyzing as far as native location data for the iPhone 13 device on January 8th?
January 1st through January 6th.
And in reviewing that data, did you notify any troopers to go anywhere?
Yes.
Who did you call?
I called Lieutenant Fanning, I believe.
Okay. And where did you want to send troopers to?
The Claremont Apartments in Abington, the Point Apartment Complex in Abington, and Chatham West in Brockton, Massachusetts.
And why did you want to send troopers to those locations on January 8th?
Because at that time, it was still a critical incident, and Ana Walshe was still missing at that time, and we wanted to try and locate her.
And why those apartment complexes?
In order to see if she might have went there, or...
Well, how do you know, is the phone telling you that it's at those locations? Why are those locations significant? How do you know to go to those three how do you know to send troopers to those locations?
In order to collect surveillance, see if anyone had seen her, or...
Sure, I understand that's the why. I guess the question is the how. So what is it that you saw in the phone that said go there?
Jeep points or native location points within those different areas.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall provide in the matter now and herein shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please have a seat. Just make sure to sit nice and close to that microphone and keep your voice like that. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, Nicholas Guarino, R-I-N-O.
And, sir, where do you work?
For the Massachusetts State Police at the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office.
How long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police?
About 10 years now.
And how long have you been attached to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office?
November 2019, so about 5 years, 6.
And I take it then your current rank is true for them?
Yes, it is.
Within that unit attached to the District Attorney's Office, do you have any specific responsibilities?
Yes.
What are those, sir?
I'm a forensics investigator. I'm doing cell phone and computer forensics, and also a sexual assault investigator.
And what training have you had as far as digital forensics? Just kind of a brief overview.
Numerous trainings through Cellbrite, Magnet, Axiom, Berlin Motor Vehicle Forensics, Great Key training, all that.
Including Cellbrite?
Yes, sir.
Now, when did you become involved into the investigation concerning the disappearance of Ana Walshe?
At the night of January 6, 2023.
And you say the night, so that would have been Friday night, January 26th, January 6th of 2023?
Yes, that's correct.
And where did you go to begin your work into this case?
To the Norfolk County DA's office.
And within the Norfolk County DA's office, is there a specific place where you were able to do your work?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell me about where is that located?
So on the first floor, we have a digital forensics lab.
Yes, sir.
Where we have specialized hardware and software computer systems to extract digital devices.
And who did you meet there that night when you were working on this matter?
Trooper Connor Keefe.
And what did the two of you do that evening as far as working on this matter?
So we were provided 3 devices to be extracted and examined at some point.
And that night, about what time do you think you left the district attorney's office?
It would have been 12:45. Technically, it would have been the 7th of January.
And had you finished downloading all the devices?
No.
And forgive me, I just want to make sure I get this right. What are you doing with the devices on the 6th?
So each device has to be plugged into whatever we're using to extract the software, the data. So for this one, we use Great Key for the devices.
Okay. And so had you completed all the devices that night?
No. The first had been completed, and then the second one had started. And once we knew that it was pulling the information correctly, I left for the night.
And when did you return to work on this matter?
It would have been January 7th. I got to the office probably around 2:45, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And when you got to the office, sir, what was the status as far as the devices having the data pulled from them?
The third device had been pulled, I believe, that morning, and they had been returned prior to my arrival to the office.
So the devices weren't there at this point in time?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what do you do now that the data's been pulled from the devices?
So they have to be downloaded from the key, and then once downloaded, they go onto our server. Once there, we have to open them in either Cellbrite or Magnet Axiom to view the information from the devices.
Okay. And so that day, what program did you, well, so when you got there at, say, 3 o'clock, what step in the process are you as far as analyzing the data?
I have to download it from the server, from Great Key, and then from the server, from the DA's office server, we have to open it into Cellbrite or, like I said, Axiom to have that data viewable. That's what the programs make that data viewable.
Okay. And so which program did you use to view the data of the devices on January 7th?
I only looked at one device. It was the iPad Mini 6. I used Cellbrite.
And were there any parameters on what you were allowed to look at as far as the iPad Mini?
Yes, there was a date range that was given to us for December 25th, 2022 to what would have been the 6th when we extracted the information.
And when did you start looking at the data from the iPad Mini?
It would take about an hour or so to download the information from Great Key, and then another couple hours to open it. So it was probably closer to 5 o'clock that afternoon or evening.
And to be specific, there were 2 iPads that were turned over. This is an iPad without a cracked screen. It's an iPad Mini 6. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So where were you in the office when you were looking at this data from the iPad Mini 6?
At the second floor forensic computer by my desk.
And where is Trooper Keefe in relation to you when you're doing this?
He had gone downstairs to the other forensic computer down in the digital forensics lab.
And what did you do as far as beginning your search or analysis of this data?
Once it opened in Cellbrite?
Yes, sir.
So once it opened in Cellbrite, would have looked at the timeline view. So I loaded timeline and filtered by the date range that was given.
Now, why do you use the timeline view?
Multiple reasons. It's the easiest way to pare down the data by date range, and it gives a comprehensive list of how the devices interacted from again from the 25th to the 6th, as told.
And what did you begin to notice while you were going through this data and the timeline?
So it has every device interaction, what's been done with it. Started seeing searches on the 27th of December for best places to get divorced, worst places to get divorced, and best states for divorce.
And after the 27th, did you notice anything further that caught your attention when you were analyzing the data for this device?
Yes, the morning of the 1st, approximately about 4:55 a.m., began seeing searches about how to dispose of a body.
And how, after starting to see these searches, what did you do?
So I went through the information, the data, probably up to about the 2nd, and I saw numerous searches about body disposal, removal of smell, Cohasset dump, cadaver dogs at the dump, and I went downstairs and contacted to tell them what I had found search-wise.
Okay. And after speaking with Trooper Keefe, what did you do?
I contacted Detective Lieutenant Tully and advised him of the search items I found.
Who is Detective Lieutenant Tully in relation to your unit, the state police?
He was in charge of the unit at the time.
And who is the executive officer?
Trooper John Fanning. Lieutenant John Fanning.
Lieutenant John Fanning. And so you call Detective Lieutenant Tully, and what do you decide to do as far as your analysis of the data at this point in time after speaking with Detective Lieutenant Tully?
Yeah, so I took that information from the searches, I created a PDF and emailed it out and stopped looking at the data on the iPad mini after that.
Okay, and you said you emailed it out?
Yes.
You're on the right approach?
May.
Right there. Trooper, do you recognize that email?
Yes.
Is that the email that you sent out to the members of the detective unit that night after seeing the data?
Yes, that is correct.
And what time did that email go up?
At 6:25 p.m.
On what day, sir?
Sorry, January 7th, 2023.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question for clarification? It's Exhibit 17.
Yes, Your Honor.
At some point in time in the pleadings, I believe, I saw what I thought at the time was, based on what I knew of the evidence, what I thought was an incorrect date with regard to the searches, called them the best place to get divorced. I believe in some of the pleadings, I think it was the defense's pleadings, I'm not sure, it could be the prosecution's pleadings, that the date of that is listed in January, and that I remember reading it and thinking that's not consistent with what I thought the state of the evidence. This witness has just testified that he started seeing searches on the 27th of December of 2022, which is correct. Is there any dispute about this?
No, and I would just like to say, it wasn't my mistake because we didn't discuss divorce stuff, so I'm happy to say this.
It wasn't, well, now that you've got me curious, it was in a list of, I thought it actually was in the defense's paper, just so that if you...
Judge, I don't mean to interrupt, but if you're referring to one of our exhibits, that was the exhibit produced at the grand jury by one Michael Proctor, so if there's...
It's actually, I'm not referring to that, counsel. I'm referring to page 3 of your memorandum in support of your motion to suppress the search warrants. And on that, it says, A, best state to divorce for a man, 1/27/23 at 9:54:13 p.m.
Yeah, Your Honor, that was mine, and that must have been clerical error.
I'm just trying to get the accurate data.
And Your Honor, I think I can help counsel, and because it is a typographical error in one of the search warrants.
That's fine.
And I believe that that's how counsel got it. And so I see where it comes from. It's from a typographical error within one of the warrants. You picked up on it quicker than...
Well, because the data is new to me and it's old to you, so you gloss over it, which is totally normal. I don't know anything about this case other than what you teach me.
Your Honor, I apologize. On page 3, that was a cut and paste from the warrant, just to show the court exactly what was put in. But we agree it's 12/27.
I totally understand all of that. I just wanted to make sure that I have the right information.
And Your Honor, we all agree it's 12 points.
Good. Thank you. All right. Sorry to interrupt. Are you done with this witness?
Oh, no, I have a few more questions, Your Honor.
All right. You go right ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach the order of counsel?
Yes.
Trooper, I'm showing you a Celebrate document, and for the record, it's marked as 18 in the binder, Your Honor. Trooper, do you recognize the Celebrate document?
Yes.
What is the Celebrate document?
This is the searches, this is the web history from the Apple iPad mini.
And so this is what you're alerting the other troopers to in your email?
Yes.
So, Trooper, you sent this email out, you had a conversation with your unit commander. What do you decide to do as far as further analysis of the data from the iPad 6 mini?
Again, due to the searches and speaking with my commander, I stopped looking at the data.
And what was your next steps as far as working on, what was your next decision on what you wanted to do as far as any further analysis on this, or to get your hands on this device?
We needed to work in a search warrant for the home. The devices were there to get them again and re-image them, post a search warrant for those new devices that we get.
So you said a search warrant for the home. Were you present for a search warrant of the Walshe home in Cohasset?
Yes, I was.
And when was that, sir?
Sunday, January 8th in the morning.
And what was seized from the home as far as devices that morning?
There was 3 MacBooks, the iPhone 13 mini, the iPad 6 mini, the iPad 6 with the cracked screen, another iPad that I don't remember the exact model number of, and an iPhone SE.
Your Honor, just one moment. And I neglected to ask you just one last question. On that report I just showed you, was that in UTC?
The web history search?
Yes, sir.
Yes, that's correct.
And so what would need to be done, what do you need to do to UTC time to understand what time that search would be conducted in the East Coast in, say, January 2020?
Due to daylight savings, it would be minus 5 hours of the time that's listed.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Why did you stop?
What's that, sir?
Why did you stop?
The searches, the data, to me, the searches that I saw looked like something more than a missing person.
You told us just now on direct examination that you spent about an hour to transfer the extracted data, correct? Once it off the...
Yes, that's correct. It has to download from their server.
And then it took about 2 hours just to upload it, to celebrate physical analysis.
Yeah, give or take, sir.
And then you started your analysis about 5 p.m.
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And it's fair to say that then it's about an hour later, after you've been looking at the data, that's when you began to see these search histories that caused you some concern.
That's correct, sir.
And then it wasn't until about 20 or 30 minutes later, based on that email that's been admitted, that you then stopped and emailed.
I had stopped prior, but I had to export the information, that web stuff, so that takes time, and then put it into the email.
So it's fair to say then that you spent about an hour from 5 to say approximately 6, approximately 5 to approximately 6, looking at the data.
Yes, that's correct.
And you spent about an hour looking at, for instance, the search history data.
It was in the timeline, yes.
Yes, and so it took you an hour to scroll through and look at that data before you even came upon these suspicious...
Yes, that's correct.
So it wasn't that when you opened up the timeline feature and then put in the time parameters that suddenly these suspicious search histories popped up and you looked at them and recognized them as, in your opinion, suspicious. You had to scroll through hundreds of search history data before you even got to them, correct?
Yes, there was numerous bits of information in that data, so it's everything that was on the device, how it was utilized. So I believe it was like 190,000 different entries of data.
And you would agree with me, wouldn't you, Guarino, that if you had been instructed that the parameter was limited to communications, you wouldn't have been looking at that search data, scrolling through it for an hour, would you?
No, I would have.
Even though you were given parameters of communications only?
I wasn't given that parameter.
No,
I'm sorry.
I understand.
Yeah.
I probably was. I apologize. If you were given strict parameters that you were only to look for communications, and there was no indication of search history or location data or anything of the sort, you wouldn't have been scrolling for an hour through that search history, would you?
It would depend. There's multiple ways to have communications on a device, like a web chat feature, calls, obviously the regular calls, texts, but the app data also has, like Snapchat, loads differently. So there's multiple ways to find only the communication data.
Right, and once again, Celebrite Physical Analyzer has all these categories you can check off, correct?
Yes.
Correct?
That is correct.
But you didn't check off any because you didn't know, you didn't believe, you weren't told that there were in fact parameters.
The parameters I was told was the date range and that communications prior to the 25th were privileged because they may have been attorney-client privileged items.
And when you just now referred to app data, it's fair to say that isn't it that what you were using, the Celebrite Physical Analyzer, actually segregates, can pull out app data separately and inform the end here's app data, you can look at this. Is that,
Again, it would depend on the app.
when we hear about this timeline feature and things like that, with the Celebrite physical analyze, it's not that when you open up the timeline feature, all of a sudden, all of this data that we're talking about, all these searches, they pop up on the screen. You have to begin to methodically scroll through them and analyze each one.
Yes and no.
Okay. And that, yes and no.
Yeah.
You had to scroll through an enormous amount of data to even get to what you consider to be the suspicious searches.
Again, yes and no.
Okay. Yeah. Yes and no. All right.
I'm sorry.
That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Nothing further on.
Witness may step down.
Thank you.